All right, where we are from, where we are, and where we are going, part two, right after the break. All right, welcome. This is All Minus One. I'm Bill. I'm your internet aggregate agent, or sorry, adjutant supreme, not agent. I'm not any sort of agent. How dare I? I would glow if that were the case. And Let's see if my camera will change color all of a sudden. In any case, guys, welcome to the show. So today we did get a little off track, and we're having a good time talking to old York, and it'll happen. So I didn't really stay on task with what I wanted to do with the show. So I just figured I'd pick up about where we were at, and basically what I had gotten into was kind of this idea of fitness versus the truth, and that the our perceptions of reality are based on fitness, on what works for us the quickest, most efficient way, basically, but it hides the truth from us. And we know this in many, many different types of cognitive heuristics. In fact, we know that for the most part, most people, unless they're highly intelligent and they could, separate their emotions out, most people just could not handle life if they didn't see life through some sort of biased lens all the time, right? And this is the problem with our world today, because the bias is so extreme, given that we have completely, totally, utterly emancipated people from responsibility. And that's not good, actually. That's terrible. It doesn't help anybody to be enslaved to a lack of responsibility, because once things fall apart, once things collapse, those people are then helpless. They are nothing but prey. And they're being preyed upon now, of course, but more importantly is the larger tragedy that will occur when all these things happen. Now, I've been talking a lot about demographic collapse and the decline, and perhaps China seems to be the case. A lot of single men there, not a lot of women. I did watch a video earlier today talking about Peter Zion's predictions not being correct about China. I don't know. What I do know is that it seems to make sense, and it seems to be not just from Peter Zion specifically. It seems to be coming from a lot of people, that the world is going to be in a demographic decline, and I absolutely believe that that is the case. We see that heavily in the West, and it has been used as an excuse for things like immigration. Now, the reality of immigration is something more like the blackmail rings, the trafficking that goes on, the drugs that are, shifted about, and all of the money off the books, and all the wealth that is happening, and all of the banks that are getting rich about the through the legal means in which cartels and other people move these things. Um, I remind you that if you look into the murders on the tracks at Arkansas when Bill Clinton was the governor there, and the numerous people that had died surrounding that, who were in the law enforcement community, who were in the prosecutor's office, yada, yada, yada. We pretty much, I think, can say that the people who were running the drug ring there that murdered these boys, that it spurred on another dozen murders, and the information that's currently classified by the FBI won't be publicly released. It suffice it to say that the president, one of the presidents of the United States, William Jefferson Clinton, probably had something to do with that. If you look into the evidence of it, it seems very true. If you look at someone's investigations into this deeper in, we of course have the Epstein files, but we have an author such as Whitney Webb, who's done a lot of work on this, so much so her singular book became two books because it was so massive and in depth in the blackmail operation scheme of the world. So why am I bringing this up when I'm talking about fitness versus truth? Well, the truth will set you free, my friends, but the truth is something that most people don't like, because they don't want freedom. They want fitness. And the people that are the best at fitness are the people at the top. They are the psychopaths. They are the ones who know how to manipulate to get what they want. And they make things work. And this happens in part with IQ, because people who are more intelligent tend to skew more towards sociopathy, psychopathy, and they tend to also be more autistic, which autistic people actually tend to not be harmful. They tend not to have those kind of traits, in fact, but um, it means that they can be sort of cold to people, and it's hard to tell the both. But these are things that we're going to talk about in videos we're going to watch. But before we get into that, we have to understand where and how this affects us in the United States and our lineage and our background. And so I had this video on how American civilization came about, the original ethnic groups that moved here. The argument here is the same kind of argument that Thomas Sowell makes about various ethnic groups moving into various areas, and basically having these cultural belief systems or cultural practices that allow them to be successful or non-successful. For instance, if your cultural practice, and there is a cultural practice of this, is to um, live off the government and to get as much welfare as possible, and to say, screw the man and the system. I'm going to be a thief and a liar and, whatever else all my life. Um, you're going to pass that down most likely to your children, and they're going to pass it down to their children. Now, I have seen this after working in a jail for 13 years. I saw this quite a bit. I saw the generational pipeline, and it's not because of the system, which is always the thing that other people want to blame, right? You don't have any agency, right? Those people have no agency. It's the system that it did it to them. Don't get me wrong, the system has problems. The system needs corrected. The system, my friends, for sure, is broken in so many ways and has been for so long, because it's not the right kind of system. It's not a system of liberty that we're living under. It's not a system of self direction. It's a system of predatory behavior. And this isn't some appeal to some sort of Marxism or anything else. It's an understanding that if you base your life, right, and what is going to be optimized for you to get the most out of your life, fitness versus what is true versus maybe what's intelligent or even wise, that takes delayed gratification. I often point to the book Killing the Competition. I don't recall the author's name off the top of my head, but Killing the Competition is a book about inner city kids, right? Young men who are dying and murdering each other, right? They're being killed, and they're killing others. And they're committing crimes, and they're making that fast money, that fast cash, and they knock up girls young, and the cycle continues. Why is this? Why does it happen? Well, it is what's fit for them, because culturally they don't really know any better. And why would you not do such a thing? Why would you not sleep with 20 or 30 or 40 girls if you don't think that anything is going to be beyond you in life, right? If there's not going to be any sort of bigger, grander thing, any sort of unifier, why would you care? Why would you not just go around and smash everyone's head in if you were the biggest, baddest MFer out there and take what you want? And see, this is in part why we create states, or at least some sort of judicial system, to ensure that this sort of injustice doesn't happen. Because what will happen, what will truly happen, is if people exercise the Nietzschean will to power, right? And I say this understanding very deeply um, the realities of the world, okay? Because the people who are in charge exercise the Nietzschean will to power. And it's not like he discovered something. He just put pen to paper of sorts, right? But if if we're if we weren't living in that kind of society, then there would be much more general equality, that Gini coefficient thing. We wouldn't be heading toward that point 0.4 inequality distribution. And it's not just about, like, some people just are not gonna be able to produce. But what you have to really understand is it's not just about the culture, it's also about genetics and the demographics of IQ and what is coming and how people certain groups encourage intelligence and the we know that certain groups Ashkenazi Jews for instance have on average 115 IQ. The Chinese, I don't know if it's broken up into ethnic groups, but from what I understand, the Chinese in general have 110 IQ on average, as opposed to Americans. Apparently, from what I have understood recently, it's something like a third of the population has an IQ of like under 90. That's sad. That's hard. Those people are the ones who are breeding the most too, though, right? So what does that bring for our future? Well, it brings Professor Dutton's book at our wits end. And then the other part of this and the demographics is, what does it bring? Well, the past is a future country, and this has to do with conservatism and religiosity and the fact that these other people aren't breeding. So before we go there, let's get into all of that with that first video about where we come from in the first place, and it explains quite a lot. You can infer a lot, and we're gonna watch this video. I know I watched it toward the end of the show last night, but we're gonna start it from the beginning. This is Anti-Commie says, we're only a bit late tonight because we had to give Privy Council its due before hopping over here. Oh, no worries, no worries. Um, I'm fine with people coming back on the replays or whatever else. Um, it, you know, if I were Bill's going to do this, my approach to this pretty much has always been and probably will always be a grind. There is some stuff I'd like to do to kind of make the channel a little bit more I don't know, marketable, friendly, whatever to a lot of people. But regardless, you know, if I have 5 people listening to me and they are gaining some sort of insight or thinking about things in a different way than I did what I wanted when I set out to do, um, it's like, yes, you should siphon all of them into here. I don't know the Privy Council, so um, but I've not been on the loop in the loop as much as far as some of the friends that we have in common. Um, in any case, let's get this video rolling. Hey, actually, before we even hit play on this, guys, make sure you let me know about the volume, any sort of echoes, anything like that. Also, like, share, subscribe, all of that. I'm over on Rumble, I'm on YouTube, and I'm still running on DLive just because I can do it directly from uh, StreamYards. But not running on Entropy right now. Not really feeling that whole thing. Um, it's not, it was a good thing to use, and I will use it again if need be. But I feel like Rumble is where it's at, and that's kind of sad for Entropy because that's how the market goes. But that's how the market goes. All right, let's roll. So we can definitely say that in this day and age that Americans are very culturally illiterate. They don't even know where they come from. And you can imagine because you have things like the 1619 Project or the Lincoln Project coming out. Now, I can tell you right now that the Lincoln Project's a bunch of rhinos who are basically old Hegelians. Old Hegelians are you know, they're Hegelians, but they're not Marxists. So it's like it is what it is. But we'll get there, right? We'll talk about that. They're also back in the day, the neocons, they were all originally Trotskyites. So go figure. And the basic idea of Trotskyites is what the Nazis did. Okay, it's like it's National Social. Oh, we don't have to have. Yeah, we can have communism for just Russia. No, we can't do that. We can't do that. And then the difference between that and, of course, for anyone who's not aware, and Leninism is that Leninism was the idea. Look, look, the plebs, the lower classes, they're not actually revolting. They're happy. How are we going to get this to work? Excuse me. Well, how did they get it to work? Well, they convinced the upper classes to get it started, basically, and the upper classes to force it upon the lower classes to get it going. And this is why we see Leninism in action today. Okay, and it's important to know these terms. I've mentioned the other week, whatever. I know Tim Pool's been going around a little bit. I've been watching of him here and there. He's been going around talking about, it's just like, what is woke? It's just they'll go with together with any narrative. They'll go with any narrative. Da, 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 da. And it's like, that's all it is. Whatever they say. And it's like, no, no, what is woke is a lot of things, and it needs to be broken down academically, because when I say something in the ether and I don't have a backing for it, someone just points and laughs and says, "Oh, you're dumb." Da, 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 da. When numerous voices come to the same conclusion, guess what? There's something there generally, but we have to carefully suss it out, because we are beings who, even though we seek truth, we cannot see truth fully. We're not able to fully perceive it. We perceive what is fit for us, not necessarily what is true. And this needs to be understood. The only being, right, that has pure, whole truth is God. So the idea of philosophy is that a man cannot necessarily have truth, but he can love truth. And in the pursuit of loving truth, glean some example of truth. And there's kind of a dichotomy or dualism there between that, and that's Platonic thought, or Platonism. And Platonism has its issues. It is Gnostic in its own sense, especially with its forms. But then there's also Epicureanism, and Epicurus was uh, he thought you could only experience the world through your perceptions and not pure reason. And obviously, that's not right either, because we can perceive the world through, of course, we perceive the world through perceptions, um, but we perceive the world through both our reason and our perceptions. But both our reason and our perceptions can lie to us. This has to be understood, right? And we can, as beings, tell ourselves these lies. It is the most powerful fundamental thing we can do as a human being is believe in something. Tell herself a mythos, right? Have a telos, a purpose in our lives by something that we tell ourselves. And again, this isn't me getting at like being anti-religious or anything like that. You all know that I'm a religious man, or at least a man of faith. But I will, what I would say is that I have to have faith and believe in something, and it helps me. It makes me act in this world, right? These people on the left are in a cult. It is the cult of death. It is the antithesis, and I mean to prove this, and I will prove this, of Christianity. It is the Antichrist religion. And what it's let me gather my thought there. What its origins is exactly in the antithesis of Christianity and all that is life and good and wonderful. And it's a bunch of secretive manipulations and accreditations to basically prop up people who are mediocre and want power. That's part of it. There's a lot of different things going on here, but for sure the midwit phenomenon is one of them. All right, let me hit play here.
Way to avoid getting hacked with PIA VPN, a virtual private network that hides your
Sorry, guys, I didn't realize I had this video. I didn't have this video on. Ugh.
understand how America really works or what actually founded it, viewing it as a series of pop culture tropes rather than a real society. In fact, Americans are some of the most culturally illiterate people about their own society I've seen in any culture in the world, since they don't deal with enough other cultures to be able to see what the defining features of their culture are. This is a video to see what America is about, what separates it from other societies, how it started, and where it's going. Watch this video to understand the world's great power today.
All right, real professional here.
Self in the screen. PIA goes above and beyond to protect your information as I've made so far, like Western become something completely different in the
All
world
right, hold
in
on.
years. In most I've made the argument in this video that America will evolve into becoming its own civilization over the next couple hundred or thousand years. In most social science studies, America, in fact, is the area that takes the West's cultural traits to the furthest extreme, being the most Western society in the world. Yet, as Aristotle said, when you push something to its logical conclusion, it becomes something completely different. And I believe this will occur in America over the next 1,000 years. However, as you'll see, I think this is a useful prism through which to view America, even if America is very clearly part of Western civilization.
Okay, so first off, this idea that in 1,000 years, whatever, it definitely will change the landscape of who we are in 1,000 years, but so will immigration. And this is a thing that migrant patterns of people creating new cultures and integrating all this stuff that we actually have some data on and can trace and all of that. And what I say would say is what we're seeing or we have seen is this mixture of these cultures from the past, but there's one that's been very, very dominant, and it's primarily the puritanical culture, the Yankee culture of the North.
America is strange in that its existence as a country is much more predicated upon events that happened in a completely different continent than the actual history of the location it's in. What I mean by that is that the native peoples were often quite advanced, with Cahokia in Illinois, for example, having a population larger than London's in the year 1200. However, that entire civilizational and cultural trajectory has very little bearing upon the current US, which
I just want to make the note that a large population, does not make you advanced per se. These people never invented the wheel, of course, but what they had was a good peace treaties in the Iroquois nations for the most part, and those were to protect them from other folks. But a lot of the native tribes were very warlike and savage, especially the further out west you went. Um, we had the Blackfoot and the Sioux were notoriously so. You had the Seminoles in Florida. Um, so it was really only a certain group. And again, that certain group only occupied a certain area. And for a long period of time in American history, several decades, 100 years or so, there wasn't a lot of expansion into the other tribes. But also, most of the land wasn't occupied. Literally, America is enormous, and a lot of it wasn't occupied. So these people weren't unified or advanced enough and didn't have the kind of technology to create the kind of empires that other people could. They didn't have advanced writing. They didn't have advanced philosophies. Um, and all of these things that happened in the West actually happened as well in the East. So, and we know more or less we can at least infer that all of that came out of what we now call the Middle East or the Military Central Command, right? Or Mesopotamia or the cradle of civilization. So it seems like it started there and spread outward. And at some point, some people made it to the Americas. We know there were advanced civilizations further down south. We know that there were certain structures built in North America and the United where the United States is at. But in general, these societies just they were not as far along. So much so that they were still cannibalizing each other and sacrificing themselves to the gods and that kind of stuff. And Europeans might have been pretty horrible, but uh, so are those people, right? It's like what are we comparing? Apples and oranges here? I mean, they're both fruits. They're both tasty, but they're not the same thing.
which is fundamentally an extension of European civilization. Actually, genetically native people are less than 1 or 0.5% of America's population. One of my favorite historians, Leland DeWitt Baldwin, said America is a side effect of the English Civil War, and that's a good place to start to try to figure out America's identity. The starting point is that, like every other country in the world, America's sense of its history is warped by what it wants to believe. And one of the biggest myths we get is that America is a single nation rather than an ethnic federation that is over time fused into a single identity. One of the best books you ought to read in order to understand America is Albion's Seed by David Hackett Fisher. It goes through how America's identity is driven off 4 regional migrations from Britain during the colonial period. These separate cultural groups
He gets into this. I mentioned this last night. I was very aware, and I mentioned before the Yankees, the Quakers took over the Midlands, and this makes a lot of sense. I'm uh I'm an Appalachian, but we can see right here in this map where I grew up at in Hagerstown, Maryland, it's Quaker land, man, and not really even the Quakers, but the Anabaptists, big part of it. You have the Quakers, the Mennonites, the Beachy Amish, the Amish. They're all there. Um, it's very different religiously. Maryland was founded as a Catholic state. There were little Catholic patches, but the Appalachians they were primarily hill people from the island of or sorry, from Ireland and from Scotland and from the Northern Highlands of Scotland. Um, And then in the South was a certain kind of aristocratic class, which is why they had the very large plantations and a lot of slaves. So the Yankees, though, primarily were Dutch and Puritans and the Dutch traders and whatever else. He gets into it. So I'll let him do the talking.
exist until today and drive the country's politics, culture, and every action it does. You can track these regions with linguistics, architecture, voting patterns, and anything else you would want to look for. We've validated this on a genetic basis where all of these groups still exist today, comprising the genetics of around 60% of Americans, with these ethnic groups being larger than most European countries. The ethnic differences between the northern and southern British Americans are equal to that between different European countries, and is large enough that you would have expected a large mountain range or desert on the Mason-Dixon line. I go through all of these separate groups in my first video on American regional cultures in greater depth. The northern United States was settled by 3 distinct groups. The first are the New England Yankees, who formed what amounted to an ethno-state. They were religious fanatics from eastern England. They were almost entirely middle class and created a culture with extreme amounts of control over people's lives, legally banning Christmas, dancing, music, being lazy, or arguing too loudly with your spouse.
So, mind you, who is this? This is the bourgeois, right? The middle class is the bourgeois. All right. The middle class and the puritanical belief system that was brought over from these religious fanatics, because nobody liked the Puritans. They're a certain kind of religious fanatic. Um, there's a let me see here. There's a quote from Nietzsche. I think I have it pulled up here somewhere. Hmm. I have it here somewhere. I'll get it. I'll get it. It's from All Too Human. Human, All Too Human, that is. Um, Here we go. The everyday Christian, if the Christian dogmas of a revengeful God, well, that's not a Christian dogma. That is a Manichaean dogma of Gnostic dualism, of the true God who made the universe actually had nothing to do with the creation of this place. It was the demiurge, a lesser God, that created this place, this universe, this world that we live in. And so, right off the bat, Nietzsche is probably assuming a Calvinistic God. And why do I know that? Well, because the Calvinists and the Lutherans, who were both Augustinian, ran Germany, that and the Catholic Church. So they had that division, and the Germans were murdering each other over their religion during the Reformation and afterwards, which is why uh, I think they probably fought so hard to be seen as the intellectual hotspot and cultural hotspot of Europe during the modern era after the Renaissance. And the reason for that, I would say, is because they felt like they probably did something wrong with religion, and Nietzsche is taking a look at that. So his perspective, his skew of what religion is, like a lot of these people in this time period, we're talking 1800s, right? He wrote Human, All Too Human. I think it was published in 1878 or something like that. So think about that. He has that in mind. I've never been taught that. Now I know that that's a teaching in some Christian sects, but I never been taught that. In any case, let's continue with that quote. If a Christian dogma is of a revengeful God, universal sinfulness. Again, this comes from Augustinianism. Universal sinfulness, the Western notion of original sin, did not exist until the 6th century and or 5th century and no, 6th century. Yeah. Trying to think when people lived. And I think that's right. Let me make sure I'm right on that. Okay. Born in it's the 5th century. Okay. Yeah. 354, or he was Bishop of Hippo from 396 to 430. There we go. So, um, so this wasn't really a thing till then, and he integrated it, and the church really ran with it. But I again, I think the church was like 10 standard deviations away from Christ at that point, probably already. Um, Anyways, says universal sinfulness, election by divine grace, and the danger of eternal damnation were true. It says, if Christians believe these things, it would be a sign of weak mindedness and lack of character not to become a priest, apostle, or hermit, and in fear of trembling to work solely on one's own salvation. It would be senseless to lose sight of one's eternal advantage for the sake of temporal comfort. If we may assume that these things are at any rate believed true, then the everyday Christian cuts a miserable figure. He is a man who really cannot count to three, and who, precisely on account of his spiritual imbecility, does not deserve to be punished so harshly as Christianity punishes to promise him. Which, again, it does not. there was dogma, you could say. There was teachings that taught harsh punishments. There was developments like I don't know, Dante, who had nothing to do with the Christian tradition. In fact, that probably had far more to do with occultic practices and whatever else, stories that people had seen and heard, and things that were Christianized to some degree, right? Because that's what the church did. It sanitized everything by some sort of its own Hegelian synthesis before Hegel even thought of this idea. So I bring that to note because you know, the Puritans were an even more insane faction of Calvinists. So, and I do believe that their lineage is what we live under today. Emperor has arrived. Supreme Emperor Kiza. All hail. Let's see. Anybody ever on Rumbles? Let me do a little refresh. I don't know why I have a tickle in my throat, but I do. So sorry, guys, if I keep coughing.
Their church services were 6 hours long, where a giant painted eye of God would stare down the congregation. At the same time, they were competing to be the wealthiest society in the world, as well as easily being the most technologically innovative per capita, equal, and educated in the whole world.
Okay, so those 3 points need to be hit. They sought to be wealthy and establish power through wealth, and they sought to be innovative with technology. And this is why the North outpaced the South with that very soon, very quickly in the US. Okay? You also, with the all-seeing eye and all that kind of stuff, the idea, right, of the Puritans was to enforce this very, very strict sense of living. And I just, to my mind, believe that this has like so much influenced our politics forever. This isn't, again, something I just like came across this video and the other day, and I was like, yeah, of course. But I already knew, like, that I've been saying this for years about the Puritans. The Puritans, the people in the South, they may have had some aristocracy, but they didn't really influence America that much comparatively. Not like the Puritans did. And I can tell you right now, I mean, us hillbillies up here, we we definitely, I mean, redneck culture is a part of us, but redneck culture is everywhere. You know, or as I say, I'm a suburban redneck. All right.
The Yankees averaged 10 children every generation, almost all of whom survived, and then had another 10 kids, making this region a giant population steamroller. The Yankees populated the whole northern tier of America, stretching out to Michigan, Utah.
And I mentioned this again last night. Look who's out in the far west. Now, mind you, those states used to be red states, but there's a certain culture, there's certain belief systems that go along, they get passed down. And if you look at the churches today, right, some of the churches that have been influenced by the modern day, who are going against teachings, right, and becoming heretical for the new religion of woke. And I started this video, I was talking about the new, or how religions are used to bring together people, to bring together ideas. Well, that's all woke is. That's all Marxism is. There are different iterations of it, but it's a religion, folks. It is a cult, and it is the cult of death, and it is the Antichrist religion.
And the Northwest. The Yankee world is known for being extremely competent, obsessed with social reforming, and also hated by the rest of the country for being condescending, rude, and arrogant. Then you get New York, which was founded by the Dutch and later conquered by the British. Ever since, it's been a city-state that exists to be the culturally diverse seaport that sucks up cultural creativity from abroad and then funnels it to the rest of America. New York is a black hole that's able to be so creative and industrious by basically only caring about money. Then the final part of the North is the Midland Quakers in Pennsylvania, where I grew up. It really pisses me off when people call me a Yankee, since Pennsylvania is extremely culturally distinct from the rest of the Northeast, and in some ways is culturally closer to the Midwest. The Quakers were religious fanatics from North England, like the Puritans, but believed in the exact opposite stuff. They're a meditation-based.
So the Quakers are actually so pacifistic that they don't even have leaders in their church services. They basically just let people stand up and talk and do whatever. They're interesting, but there weren't a lot of them, and he calls them the Quakers, but I would say it was probably more appropriate that they're Anabaptist. Now, some of those Anabaptists probably came over from Germany later on. Those would be your Mennonites or Amish, or as they call themselves, the Beachy Amish, which is often, you know, basically Mennonites. There's liberal, more strict, and more liberal, just like anywhere else. But they all speak Old German. They all speak Old High German. Um, so, and that's part of the Pennsylvania Dutch thing, and they're not really Dutch. It's Deutsch. But yeah, that's a whole nother thing.
Religion with no hierarchy who believe in tolerance and free thinking. They set up Pennsylvania as an anarcho-capitalist state with lots of immigrants, especially from Scotland and Germany. Pennsylvania was the wealthiest, most populous, and cosmopolitan state in early America, being a big driver of the Industrial Revolution. It formed the Midwest culture of being friendly, down-to-earth, hardworking, and created the idea of religious and social tolerance in America. This is the origin of Middle America. Pennsylvania is called the Keystone State since the Middle states played the moderate.
It also, Pennsylvania, also Ben Franklin's home state. The establishment of public schools was there. Of course, being right there where New England starts, and there's a reason why we call it New England, right? The Yankees in New England, that's these people. Go up to Vermont. You're going to meet really conservative people who are into super, super liberal values. It's insane. And I should say super progressive values. That's why Bernie Sanders got voted. But they're really conservative and other traditional means. But it's this acceptance and tolerance and love, and it's this detachment from reality, the reality that the world is brutal and evil and harsh, and basically we're in a really nice, really stable period right now that's probably about to come to an end, given how much instability is happening around the world, especially in our own government. And that's getting really hot right now on the kickoff side. Again, I believe we have time. I believe you have time to prepare. I'm not saying drag your feet, folks. There's a reason why I'm doing a stream at 10 o'clock at night, and I just started streaming again after 6 months because I've been trying to bust my butt, getting myself prepared for this stuff. I'm about ready to pick up another job. So I don't know if the streaming schedule will remain, but we'll see. But my family's about to make a move. There's other stuff that we're doing. There are things I'm doing in the background, and you really should be too. And if I am wrong, I will praise God for being wrong, because I'd rather be prepared and wrong than be right and have the travesties that are in my mind likely to happen. And if anything, then at least we can make our own Byzantium. We can make our own little enclave of protection and goodness and safety to carry on. And then, once all the crazy people expire, our our offspring can then proliferate the world, and then we can have that new country, that country that was supposed to be the United States in the first place.
Role for all of American history between the South and the North, who were permanent enemies, holding the country together. The problem with this cultural system is that it's too provincial, inward-looking, and laid back. New York was always able to outcompete Philadelphia, given Philadelphia cared much more about maintaining its local social structure than being on top of the next innovation, making Philly more pleasant than New York, but also turning it into a backwater. Now we cross the Mason-Dixon line into the South. I actually used to live right on the Mason-Dixon line, which is the border between the northern and southern states, with my school bus stop in Delaware and my house in Pennsylvania. However, until recently, this was a massive jump between an almost entirely white urban merchant society in the temperate zone to a mixed race agrarian aristocratic one in the tropical with alligators and palm trees. Virginia was settled by the second sons of South English nobility that made an aristocratic society that provided much of early America's best leadership, like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, or Robert E. Lee. Virginia was settled by a combination of these aristocrats and poorly educated small farmers. The land was divided up between massive plantations, and the South became a society with a very clear class structure and the worst human development statistics in all of America for all of America's history. In order to maintain their standard of living as aristocrats, they needed workers, but the whites were unwilling to be their serfs. thus meaning they started importing black slaves who became 1/3 of the South's population. The compromise between upper and lower class whites was to basically oppress blacks, and that resulted in white supremacy being an incredibly integral force of Southern culture, which only really started to loosen up in the 60s. Black Americans became a racial caste that were kept as slaves, didn't breed with whites, and were prevented from owning property, obtaining an education, rising to leadership, or operating in the market for the first 250 years. Due to being isolated from the white society as slaves for their first 250 years, blacks have remained a separate caste in American society for their entire history. Blacks today are significantly poorer, often living in heartbreaking ghettos, and commit crimes at much higher rates. The United States has paid for the sins of slavery by having the black community's social problems for centuries afterwards. This Virginian culture morphed into the Deep South further south, an area that was 2/3 black in the colonial and early republic period. The Deep South lost Virginia's aristocratic character, being a nouveau riche ruling class that only cared about money, and became much more brutal due to having to keep down the majority black population. It's been the South's deeply conservative, fiery core that's also been the nemesis with New England, while the middle states decide whoever wins in the culture war. At the same time, the Deep South has provided America with much of its culture, whether rock, barbecue, or jazz. David Hackett Fisher's book African Founders is a pretty good black version of Albion Seed, showing their influence on American society. The final area of the South and cultural region of America is Appalachia. This area was settled by Scots-Irish tribes of Northern Ireland in the English-Scottish borderland. They were used to centuries of war and didn't have a strong work ethic, organizational abilities, or unified society. This makes the Scots-Irish area some of the very poorest in all of America. However, their warrior culture has kept America real, vital, and from descending into decadence and elitism. Our country would be much more beta and cringe without them. You can thank the borderland. They were used to centuries of war and didn't have a strong work ethic, organizational abilities, or unified society. This makes the Scots-Irish area some of the very poorest in all of America. However, their warrior culture has kept America real, vital, and from descending into decadence and elitism. Our country would be much more beta and cringe without them. You can thank the Scots-Irish for America's charismatic religion, pushing the frontier forward against the Indians, country music, cowboy culture, and everything else that's badass. The Scots-Irish populated a massive region stretching from the Appalachian Mountains to Texas, New Mexico, and Oregon. These 6 American regional cultures formed all of America's cultures before the American Civil War. The nation was formed as a federation between them in which the national politics were compromises and negotiations made by each region. We don't talk about this at all since it would push against the American attempt at unification that our society has been pushing. People like to say immigration has destroyed these groups. However, first of all, immigration is overhyped, with roughly half of America's ancestry in 2010 coming from before the revolution.
Apparently, I was muted. I was just talking, and I didn't even have the chat up. I'm stopping it. I was talking about the Appalachians and the Scot-Irish being awesome, and then I said something about the Presbyterians, Scotland, but I was talking about the charismatic movement, and basically that came out of in parts, the Methodist movement, the Wesleyan movement, and where I live, there's all kinds in the country back roads back here. There's all kinds of like little Methodist churches, and then so later on, the Pentecostal movement started primarily out of the Azusa Street revival. This is just some recent church history. The charismatic movement as a whole, as far as Christianity goes, and the West is diverse. It's not just the Pentecostal church or whatever. It's a lot of different things. In any case, I think there's a couple more minutes of this I want to watch with you guys. You can watch the rest of it. Obviously, it's like 40 some odd minutes. I have other videos I want to get to. So let's do that.
And from genetics, a majority of non-Hispanic white ancestry is of British and Irish origin even today. However, the immigrants assimilated into these previous regional cultures, thus allowing them to survive until today, and much of American politics is still about maintaining compromises and negotiations between them.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rudyard the Woodafaltist guy, and I'm really excited to shout out my new podcast called Common Ground. I'm going to be doing it with David Hamilton from the America's Future Foundation, and we're going to be bringing on interesting guests and trying to talk about subjects in a way that promotes
our cultural aberration in comparison to the rest of the world. This makes sense given England was already one of the most are near analyze variables and isolate.
All right, I think this is like the last thing that I want you guys to see on this, at least that I want to show after his little ad there. And it again, though, like we have to understand that the cultures we came from very much still influence us today. We don't just come up in a vacuum like the left believes. Yeah. Anyways.
Rather than holistically, and view morality as an abstract rather than a social norm. The US and most cultural surveys scores the most extremely weird society in the world, while Japan or Indonesia are on the other extreme side of the scale. This makes sense given England was already one of the most weird societies in the world, and what ends up happening is that in colonies, the most extreme elements of the previous culture at that time get amplified and fossilized.
Oh, okay. So I did skip over something important there. He was already done his ad. My bad.
There's many similar values, those making up the American character as a nation. As alluded to before, America is culturally the most Western nation in the world. In cultural psychology, there's a term called weird, or Western educated, industrial, religious, and democratic. Weird societies are a cultural aberration in comparison to the rest of the world. They're individualist, rational, view time and causation as linear, analyze variables in isolation rather than holistically, and view morality as an abstract rather than a social norm. The US and most cultural surveys scores the most extremely weird society in the world, while Japan or Indonesia are on the other extreme side of the scale. This makes sense given England was already one of the most weird societies in the world, and what ends up happening is that in colonies, the most extreme elements of the previous culture at that time get amplified and fossilized. America was settled largely by Britain's middle classes, the most weird social class, thus pushing it even further. America's biggest advantage as a society is its English cultural heritage, where if you look at countries in the Anglosphere, and you could throw the Netherlands in this, the Netherlands, England, Canada, the US, Australia have extremely different geographies, but they're all wealthy, successful societies, thus meaning the cultural institutions we're able to provide those societies with lots of advantages.
So, and it includes the Netherlands because of its tradition. And, that area is basically um, off the coast of France, kind of thing. The Normans and the Brits were fighting back and forth for power over centuries and whatever, and the Dutch are kind of there. So, anyways, um, and yeah, I would say the Dutch are a little bit more unique um, in their own right, but whatever. Um, let's go.
And lots of people like Peter Zeihan or Real Life Lore like to say that America is successful purely due to its geography. And that's partially true because America does have a good geography in many regards. However, America did not have a perfect geography.
Yeah, America, this is good America over here. This is pretty crap. This is really rough out here. So, though I think with modern technology we can do quite a bit. We can do quite a bit more than we used to be able to. But the vast expanses of land are were what was so useful for us. The problem we're facing now, and let's just be real, folks, the problem we're facing now is that not that there's too many people, it's that we're so big and so expansive, and we have so little local resources being developed, or if they are, they're sent halfway around the world than to your next door neighbor. And this is causing tremendous problems with the supply chain and any point breaking down, because it's not like direct to seller, kind of thing, or sorry, direct to buyer kind of thing. It's got to go through these processes. A lot of this was established and set up originally under FDR in the progressive era. And again, this goes back to the Civil War. When the Civil War, I don't know if I was muted for that, but I was saying about the Civil War was the end of America. I don't know when I got muted. In any case, um, the 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 Civil War set up the imperialistic America, and then the imperialistic America was able to kind of morph into that communistic sort of thing, because that's actually what communism really is it's a means of social. It's it's an interesting thing because it's a commune, right? So it puts everybody's needs, right, last for the needs of everybody, which is a paradox. You can't do that, right? You can't remove the individual and then say you're taking care of everybody's needs. And if you do remove the individual, then that individual has a certain grievance to have against everybody else because everyone else is the elite. But see, then in the paradox of communism, of this socialist system, at the same time, everybody, right, who is the elite isn't the elite, right? Everybody who's at the top, everyone who controls everything, no, they're benevolent and good because it's the system itself, the belief in the system itself. It is perfect and good, right? And like any religion, it's just full of paradoxes. There you can't get away from it. You can't get away from the circular thing of well, one person's needs might be more than another person's, but that other person or other people might not deem that one person's needs such, because how do they know what that person needs? Well, they might just be faking it. Why are they trying to get more than me? And then you get all the envy, spite, jealousy, all that stuff that people have, all the pettiness. And of course they're going to be petty because Marxism is a wholly materialistic philosophy. The the escape on the religious side of it to some sort of divine place is that nowhere place. Their nirvana, if you would, is the nowhere place. And maybe not all Marxists are utopian, but man, if you think you can change your genders, you think you can out health your fatness, um, or out beauty your fatness. Let me tell you something. Let me tell you something, folks. If you think you can use things, let's say soft Marxism, soft socialism, soft fascism, like modern monetary theory, Keynesian economics. If you think that Piper isn't going to be paid his dues eventually, you're wrong. You're wrong. It doesn't work that way. There are fundamental realities and laws to the universe that must be followed. If I jump off my roof or out this window, I'm not going to be feeling very good afterwards. Could potentially kill myself, actually. And I don't want to do that. So I'm not going to tempt it. And I'm not going to say, well, my truth is that I can fly out that window. You know, to steal from Ben Shapiro, that's just like your opinion, man. That was I hope you guys got that joke. Ben Shapiro used to say, it's not your truth, it's your, it's not your truth, it's just your opinion. It's like, okay. And instead I did the dude. Never do that again. It was traumatic. What did I do? Who did what? 25, 30 minutes? Oh man. I couldn't have been muted that long. What are you talking about? 25, 30 minutes? Man, that's terrible. Well, this is what happens when I don't have two screens. I can't watch chat at the same time. What's up, Sniper? My children would suggest otherwise, but you know, this is why you should have the chat up. I can't have the chat up when I only have one computer screen, Kizza. Doesn't work that way.
And including the entire state of Florida until recently.
I did that again too. You know, if I had a producer.
However, America did not have a perfect geography. You look at a lot of the South was malarial and swampland, including the entire state of Florida until recently. The West was a desert. The Great Plains weren't farmable, but the U.S., due to having an advanced cultural technologies, was able to make those lands habitable for white Americans. And you look at Argentina as another example. Argentina has a perfect geography. It's
Stop being a poor. Yes. I had another monitor. If you can tell, I'm not in the same room anymore. And I kind of wanted to dig the old monitor out. I think it's in storage, but we might be moving soon, so I don't really care that much. In any case, it would make my life easier. What would make my life really easy is if I understood how to use OBS way better than I do, and not have to pay StreamYards. But that's a whole nother thing. Stop being a poor. All right.
Temperate, has some of the most fertile soil in the world, a central river system, but because it had an Iberian cultural heritage, it wasn't able to become a successful society.
Because the Iberian cultural heritage is lazy. And that's what we're talking about, guys. There's a different work ethic from a different cultural perspective. And again, this isn't like fringe or extreme. There's a lot of people that believe this, including Thomas Sowell. It's one of his chief fundamental arguments for why there are disparities in certain communities in the United States.
And Amory during Accor said America is an old society in a new nation, and that the cultural trajectories America pulled from are thousands of years old, while America itself is only a couple hundred years old.
Because we are Roman. Our whole society is Roman.
There are three countries that I think are useful to compare to America over this video, those being the English, Romans, and Chinese. Let's start with the English. America is culturally a hyper-powered England. England in 1600 was known for being an individualistic, capitalist, free-thinking, and intrepid country inside the European context. Then America took all those traits even further. In most ways, it's useful to view America by looking at English trends and then putting them on the scale of a continent. More so, the American character is heavily based off the England of that very era. 17th century England was religiously fanatical, so freedom-loving it killed the king, practiced laissez-faire capitalism, was very well armed, had lots of religious tolerance, and was starting the scientific revolution. Those are all things America kept for its whole identity, while they were just a phase for Britain. You can even see this in how American English is an archaic form of early modern English. The English that Shakespeare spoke is closest to that spoken in the current US. David Hackett Fisher has written an interesting book called Fairness and Freedom, showing how the US acts more like 17th century England that it came from, while for New Zealand it acts more like the 19th century Britain that settled it. This leads to another interesting point where the US has a fossilized social structure from the medieval/early modern Europe that created it. Let me repeat that. The US has the social and political structure of a medieval country. Before you Europeans start snickering, that doesn't bode well for you guys. An interesting point I read is that the US was founded by rural people who kept an older European social norm, while the culture in the cities was that which won out in Europe. Thus, the US maintains an older, more antiquated order. Some of the examples of this is that the US Constitution is closest to the federalized, decentralized states of medieval Europe, like the Holy Roman Empire, rather than a modern European country. Modern European countries had strong centralized governments run by unified elites.
Why is that? Because the high culture of society in the 1800s, right? The high culture in the 17 and 1800s was German. All of the philosophy is out of Germany. All of the philosophy is collective philosophy, right? We're talking about Rousseau. We're talking about, we could throw Kant in there, but I don't think he's as important for the lineage. So we basically have Rousseau, Hegel, then we have Marx, and then we have Nietzsche. Now, Nietzsche is a little bit of an outlier because he wasn't a socialist, but the things he teaches blend in really well, and especially if you're a psychopath. Okay, then then there's the Frankfurt School. Okay, and then eventually we shift over to the French and the French intellectuals. Now, Rousseau, sure, we could talk about that, and he inspired the French Revolution and all that stuff. But that's because at that time, before then, basically, they were the height of society, right? And before that, it would have been like Italy, Renaissance, Italy, and the various cities, like Florence, that were going through that at the time, because most everywhere else was in the Dark Ages. Now, when we say culture, too, what you really have to understand is that culture is a newer terminology used in a social scientific way, right? In a way of looking at society, sociology. But culture was a word that was around that really meant something more like high culture, like the highest values, art and all that stuff, the highest amount of thinking. Same with society. The word society always meant high society. Why? Because these were the people that influenced the world from the top down. And this is kind of part of the thesis of the synthetic society, right? That there's that superstructure that pushes everything down on the people. And essentially, the people just eat it. They just take it. They just take the scraps and they listen to the psychopaths. And it's sad because the people, given their own devices to live, actually do really well. And I'm going to show you that here soon. So let's watch the last few minutes of this.
The US, meanwhile, maintained the earlier model of less strong class divisions, but strong regional ones. In the US, like medieval Europe, no one strong social class was able to solidify control over the society, with instead power being batted back and forth between different social groups. The US, like medieval Europe, is a so-called veto-ocracy, in which there are many social groups that are capable of vetoing a decision, rather than a single class like in Europe. This has made the US a less hierarchical.
This was once true. It's not true anymore.
Society than Europe. This is also the US's greatest advantage over any other country. Its divided elite. In most societies, a single elite, whether the bureaucrats in China and France or the priests in ancient Egypt and India, hijack the society for their own gain, thus effectively strangling the whole society's progress. However, the US, due to its decentralization, is always able to transfer elites when the old ones become corrupt. However, there is a significant disadvantage to this in that the US, since it has so many social classes that have power, it's very difficult to pass decisions since one group can just veto it, which is why Congress has not done anything in 40 years. You can see this change of elites, with the first being the coastal merchant elite, who were replaced by the southern plantation owners, who in turn were replaced by the northern industrialists, and then they were in turn replaced by coastal technocrats. And now the new order that's forming is probably an internet-based elite that's going to coalesce around the Gulf.
I disagree. I think the new elite that's forming is going to be a globally based elite that are nomadic, hopping from country to country, trying to escape the laws of taxes and other burdens. And you see this if you start looking at um, very wealthy people. That's exactly what they do, and there is a growing trend, more and more people going to that route. Now, I want to stay here in the U.S. and hunker down, but you better believe I get my finances in a situation where I can flee something that's coming. I certainly will, and that's what people have always done if they're wealthy enough to do so. When the Third Reich came in, lots of people fled Germany. Lots of people, and again, it's always the upper classes that get away from all this. But anyways, you guys can watch the rest of that if you'd like on your own. That's what if alt
Some countries
heist is the name of the channel, and pretty interesting stuff. I like this kind of stuff. Um, there are numerous factors in all of these things, of course, but I certainly think that culture is one of the strongest, and cultures do and will change over time. So, Africa has cheap land. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you gotta be worried about murdered for it. But sure. Sure. Depending on where you're at in Africa, I guess. I think the Chinese own most of it by now, though, to be honest with you. All right. So let me keep rolling here. I have that up there twice. Didn't need that. Boom. All right. So let's talk about this. We talk about this idea of these uh, various demographics, right? Different cultures, different belief systems, now completely fractured by this mind virus, right? By this new religion, by this cult of death. And in that, they're they're trying to rebuild as if we didn't exist before this, and they're pushing too hard, too fast on this, which is why people aren't being carried along with it, right? People aren't really going along. People are going along because they don't want to be pressured. Obviously, we just had somebody indicted, and we've yet to hear the sentence, but indicted for posting a meme. You know, Fortunately, the QAnon shaman was released earlier, probably due to Tucker Carlson, which is insane that he was under any of that in the first place. And the reality is, no one's going to do anything. We're going to continue with the lawfare. The lawfare is going to keep going. Maybe the right will actually try and do something to push back, but then that's just going to spiral down, and we're going to enter into some sort of civil conflict, or there's going to be some sort of secession, or China comes in and says, "Hey, you guys are in the midst of a war. We're going to come in and we're going to start taking over stuff because we've been selling out to them forever." And I mean, our president pretty much has his hand in their cookie jar, as far as I'm concerned. And what are we doing? Well, we've pulled out of Afghanistan. Like, why? Why did we pull out of Afghanistan the way we did? Well, so we could hand it over to the Chinese. Duh. Like, so we could hand the weapons and the vehicles over to the Taliban. Duh. Same reason why, we couldn't remove them before and we left them for ISIS, because we want that trouble there. We want that instability. We want to be able to make excuses. We want to be able to fight these perpetual wars. We want to do these things. And the problem is, it's over, man. It's over. BRICS is a thing. It's in place. The petrodollar is no more. Sure. Are we still trading in oil in the dollar? Of course. But so are we in yuan, and so are we in rubles. Things are shifting. Things are changing. I think that people want local. I think that people that are waking up, people that are smart enough. What the problem that we're going to face is all the people that aren't. That 1/3 of the population that has a 90 or less IQ, 85 actually or less. Who do you think has them? Because see, the government, they've been doing this for years. They've been setting up mutual aid, right? Mutual aid used to be a thing you would do. You would join the Shriners, or you'd become a Freemason, or you would get some sort of group insurance, right? Something so that you could have some sort of protection in case something really terrible happened to you. Or, you just broke your arm and it's more a more expensive medical bill than normal. And the government kind of realized early on, this happened with the labor laws and the communification of our societies. And they were like, well, you know what? You know what we can do? We know this Gini coefficient thing exists. And I don't know if they actually the Gini coefficient, that is. I don't know if they really knew that exists at the time, but they saw something, right? And they're like, if we give these people money, they'll be satisfied just enough. They'll be satisfied just enough that they won't revolt. And so that's what they do. And in doing so, at the same time, we're encouraging certain things. And it's going to be purposeful, folks. It has to be. We all know this. Like, I go down the litany of things that we're encouraging. We're encouraging single motherhood, which is terrible for children and the mothers. But, screw the mothers. Honestly, I don't care about them. They're adults. They want to act a fool. They're going to do it, whatever. You men need to stop messing with them. And don't get me wrong. I mean, I messed with single mothers in the past. Whatever. I didn't think about it like I do now. And that's kind of the thing, is I gotta address it, because it's not good. And we can go blame the men and why aren't they there and yada, yada, yada. We've been doing that for years. For years. There's laws in the books. I worked corrections. I saw lots of guys locked up for child support. Okay. And it doesn't help the child. It's not a good thing. It's not a good system. It's dumb. So on top of that, we have a system that encourages women to lie about how their boyfriends or spouses have act if they're, I don't know, manipulative, harmful, abusive, that kind of thing. It encourages them to do so to basically gain control, the psychopathy making that I keep talking about. And in that control, in that moment, there's a sense of retribution, right? There's revenge. And we all know that ladies would never want to get revenge on anyone. It's not like there's some saying like hell hath no fury like a woman scorn. There's a reason why these sayings go on and on forever, for time immemorial. And that is because they're true. They're truisms. They're axiomatic, actually. So just have to deal with that, right? We have to quit living the lies. We have to quit pretending and writing the lies off. We have to quit doing this female type mindset. And so I wanted to talk more about this last week, but I didn't really get into it as much as I wanted to. But I did a bit of obfuscating the reality and then going to the extreme. Well, I know this one example. It's like that's not the majority. I've had these conversations with women before in the past, mostly on the interwebs, but just saying like you know, where I'm like, yeah, the normative thing, and they go, and then they laugh, normative. Yeah, I'm not talking about the norm. It's like then you're not talking about anything, right? We can talk about the extremes, but we're not going to model our society around the extreme of the 2% right over here and the 2% over there. It doesn't make any sense, right? If we are going to model our society after, I don't know, genius IQ, do you think that we might miss something in that, given that it's such a small part of the population? But in fact, that's actually sort of kind of what we've done, right? With this credentialism. We've credentialized the world. And so I want to talk about that real quick. And I have this video from Professor Dutton. It's actually not his video. It's on another channel. And then I want to talk about some solutions. Let's see here. This ITQ, late developers, creativity, jealousy, narcissistic. Okay, here we go. Yeah, let's go to the narcissistic. You guys still with me? I mean, I see I got viewers. I'm just saying. Are we following? We're catching what I'm throwing. Oh, looks like I got 4 eyes over on Rumble. That's cool. Thank you guys for being over there. For now, like if you're gonna donate, that'd probably be the place to go. Let's see what you got saying there, Sniper. Oh, you're just glad to see me alive. Yeah, yeah. Well, what hell, the last time you saw me was was what, November 10th, right? Uh I was pretty lit on that. Pretty lit. I had those beers I was drinking were 9%. I drank like 6 of them in like 2 hours or something stupid. I was freaking I was having a good time. I was living my best life. Not really. I was not feeling good the next day. And I think that was probably the last time I've drank that that hard. Anyways, let's go.
I think a lot.
Okay, let me back this up. So I'm gonna let him talk about narcissist first, because this kind of segues into the next little clip. But he's going to talk about credentialism and why these people do this. And I always say, think about someone like Neil deGrasse Tyson, who I don't get. I don't get why people love this guy. He's just a dude. He's not particularly charismatic. He's not particularly intelligent. The stuff he says is like basic stuff that I can read in any science article anywhere, and it's not very in depth. And I certainly don't like any of his political takes because it's all cringe and devoid of any sort of reality. And yeah, I don't know. Just saying. Don't respect the guy very much for what he is. It's like Sam Harris. It's like I actually I had more respect for Sam Harris than I used to, um, despite his beliefs, till very recently. And then you can just see how Oh, well, Sam obviously is not a very actually that smart of a guy. He's just able to see some things. You know, he can't see uh how terrible his own biases are. I mean, the whole Hunter Biden comment about kids in the basement and then versus Trump University is like, I don't know how you could be that obtuse. And I also don't believe that you should just dogpile people because they like say something you don't agree with. You can't just turn on everybody because they don't agree with you 100%. That is freaking retarded. Don't be a retard. Don't do that. You're going to disagree with people. But there's just something with Sam Harris. It's so like simple-minded, obtuse, uh, sophistic. Like it just not sophisticated, sophistic. Like he's a sophist, right? Sophistry. Um, arguing, which I don't normally think of him as a sophist, because that would be like arguing the 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 point in bad faith, knowing that you don't really mean what you're saying. I think Sam means what he says. I don't think he's a good reasoner, and that's the bottom line to it. Someone like Neil deGrasse Tyson is just somebody that just he just bloviates. He just regurgitates what he's been told, and that's where my problem is that do these people really delve down into what they believe and what they're taught and why they believe it? Are they really picking that apart? Are they really trying to free themselves with knowledge, or they try to enslave themselves with some sort of propaganda or a simulacrum, some sort of presentation that isn't the reality of things? Anyways, I'll hit play.
So what do you think what's going on there is obviously there are lots of separate things, but do you think one of them is actually jealousy because you've been able to co-author or author, what was it, like 100 academic papers, many of which are in evolutionary psychology, and you've written a variety of books. Do you think that it's kind of like a projection, some unconscious?
Guys, learn this. U.S. has been a socialist police state for a century. Be better counter-revolutionaries. Yes. 100%. 100%. It is 2023, and actually the 1920s was pretty good, but we were already in the socialist setting by then because of Wilson. Now, Wilson, I don't actually think is bad as Wilson's bad. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying Wilson could have been corrected had FDR not come along, had the people not continued down that route. I don't think Wilson would have been possible, though, without Teddy Roosevelt. And none of that would have been possible without the Civil War. Bottom line. So, yeah. Anyways, thank you for that.
Jealousy going on there?
I think a lot of these guys, these people are perhaps quite narcissistic, and so this is a narcissistic injury for them, that someone that they hate, that has opinions that they don't like, that they know what I say about race, intelligence, and these kinds of things.
Okay, so to preface this, I watched this the other day, but basically what he's talking about is the childish people who are essentially giving him a hard time, and he's getting into like some guy on Twitter who's supposed to be a professor himself and how childish he was, and saying, well, if you were a real professor, and he's like, well, no, he's like, of course I am. He's like, my dad is correct, guys.
They know I'm right. They know I'm right, but they have presented this narcissistic fake self, which gets them social status and power and a feeling that they're morally good and superior, that says, there's no race differences. Oh, what do we mean by race? What do we mean by education? All this stuff, right? But I don't think they feel it. They don't feel it. They know that they're lying to themselves and they're lying to everybody else. And so when I come along and say these kinds of things, it triggers them, and it makes them realize how fake they are. And the purpose of this fakeness, I think, comes from a sense of that these kinds of people have of not being worth much, a sense of inferiority, a sense of low self-esteem. Remember, being left-wing correlates significantly with being mentally unstable. And
that is one of the biggest predictors of being left-wing is high neuroticism. It really is. High openness, of course, to experience, high intelligence as well, but for sure, high neuroticism, and that's a big part of it. And again, we can wrap all that back up to what this is, and this is a religion. It's a death cult. It's a belief system that is rooted in ancient beliefs that are repackaged, and a syncretism. All these ancient beliefs, by the way, are syncretisms. You start to get, you start to get into the old mystery schools, the esoteric, the occult, the arcane, any of that stuff. Those all mean the same, basically, and they're all words for the same thing. But you start getting into them, and you'll see that these different gods and all that, they correlate with this one and that one, and so it is a picking and choosing of a buffet kind of thing for these various sort of religions. And one of the reasons why I believe Christianity is an outlier is because it's actually at its root, at its core, not what's presented as far as some big denominations, not Calvinism, not Pentecostalism, not Baptism, which isn't really even a denomination, but it's whatever, because they're Calvinist Baptist, they're non-Calvinist Baptist. Southern Baptist conventions, just there's certain tenets, right? But not Quakers, not this, not that, not the Orthodox, not the Catholics, but what Christ taught, what the Bible was. There's a historic, ideal lineage, right? It's very different than all the other religions of the world, and the early Christians knew this and addressed this. And every pretty much critique that exists today was addressed in the past. But again, people like to pretend like the past doesn't exist.
So they have all these feelings, and this makes them aware of those feelings. Because if they don't have this, if this fake self, the thing that makes them better than others is left-wing opinions and those being right, and them latching onto them and feeling that they're right on. If you show that to be, if you A, present them with that as being false, and B, show that that's nonsense, they've got nothing. They're just useless people. So I think it, as they would see it. So I think it A, triggers them. I think B, narcissism is associated with jealousy and competitiveness and whatever. So yeah, I think they are jealous. And C, it's more than jealous. It's like, how dare he? I have done the route you're supposed to do. Be bachelor in science, and I've done my PhD in science. I'm getting my unbelievable, this exists, doctoral loan. You're meant to get funding to do a doctorate, for God's sake. I mean, what's going on if you have to get a doctoral loan? But anyway, my doctoral loan, and I've done everything you're supposed to do. And this guy with his theology degree is getting published in Intelligence and Evolutionary Psychological Science,
which are racist journals.
Well, I don't know if, well, that's the only very extreme people would say that, but so how dare he? I mean, this is outrageous. So when I announced online that I had been made a professor, there was outrage. There was a person called Kevin Bird who just said, "No, you're not. You're lying. You're lying." So I put up the certificate from the. First of all, someone said it's not a real university. It's not accredited. So I put up proof that it was. Then he said, "Oh, well, no, you haven't been made a professor. You're lying." So I put up proof that was not the case. That I wasn't lying. And then there was somebody called, I quote it in my book, called P.Z. Myers.
Yeah, P.Z.
And he
Myers,
said that I was a fake professor, and I showed I wasn't. And he said, well, you'd better be concerned because it seems very important to you to be called a professor or something. That was his response. That was he's moving the goalpost.
Do you find it a bit weird when I think is it Kevin Bird? I think it's him. He has in his Twitter bio radical scientist. Do you find that type of thing is like, surely there's just science, right? And whatever comes out comes out.
No, but no, that's not how he would see it at all. I mean, so he said, what was it he said? Yeah, he said, I said, I'm not a professor at the University of Oulu. No, because he'd said I was saying I was a professor at the University of Oulu. And he said, well, you ought to be a bit concerned since it's obviously important to you that you be called professor. I said, my dear fellow, maybe if you work a tad harder at the Institute of Higher Education, one day they might make you a full professor. Best of luck to you and your children. And he said, maybe if you were less of a fuckwit, you might become a real boy sometime too. Then he blocked me. This is a professor at University of Michigan. This is a lecturer at the University of Michigan. Wrote that in public. So I don't think that these people are. What the thing is that comment that you just made, then the problem with that is that assumes that they're interested in consistency, and they're not. And it assumes that they're genuinely interested in science just for the sake of science and knowing the truth, but they're not. The I Love Science crowd, as we call them, the I Love Science crowd, the science popularizers, the Adam Rutherford types. Mm-hmm. I don't take the view that they don't love, they like status. Yeah. And they like
the instrumentalization of science in order to be
right. They like science in so much as it provides them with status.
Because if you're not a very interesting person, but you're an intelligent enough person to be able to understand some basic concepts, to memorize, to do something repetitively, mind you, because almost all work is repetitive. There's very few, like, we don't do this as human beings. We don't make doctors, right? For instance, which is an applied science. It's engineering. It's a biomedical, right? Engineering, but that's what it is. Okay. And a doctor doesn't, like, they have a lot of knowledge and stuff, but they don't know everything, and they aren't experts in every little detail. They're an expert in certain things. So, a doctor, for instance, I had a retired surgeon who was my anatomy instructor, and his specialty was rhinology, right? So the kidneys. And there were things, though, that I would ask him, and he just had no clue about it because he never thought about it because it's the basics. He was an expert in this and at that time and whatever, and it is what it is. Your family doctor is a really great example because, look, you can go to med school and you can be a family doctor if that's what you want to do. If that's what your um aspirations are, or if that's where what you believe you should do, and you just want to help people and you think you're going to be a good family doctor, there are people that do that, of course, right? It's a very, very human thing to do. Also, though, a very human thing to do is to go into a field and do the hardest level of that field, or maybe not the hardest level, but the hardest acceptable level for you that pays the most to optimize your time and your knowledge and your skill. Those people become everything but family doctors. They become the specialist. They become the people who know all the many things about a very particular thing. And there's a reason why we can't have the biggest, broadest, amazing knowledge about all things. You know, there's a reason why there's not just a ton of people out there who have a diverse view of the world. And I can tell you, like obviously, I'm like constantly taking in information and thinking about things and reading new things, and my mind doesn't really ever stop. But I certainly don't hardly know anything, and half the time I don't remember. I don't remember correctly. I mean, I have a pretty good memory, but I like things get mixed up and confused. Like, I'll remember something I read 5, 6 years ago, sometimes 10 years ago or more. But depending if I read a bunch of other stuff around it, I might confuse who wrote it, that kind of thing, or where I read it at. It's the repetition of a thing constantly that you're in that makes you masterful. And when you move away from that, you begin to lose mastery. It's just how it works. The skills are perishable. And so if you're in a certain thing, like I couldn't tell you right now, like half the stuff, it's been a long time too, but I couldn't tell you half the stuff that I had to memorize for being, like a Marine Infantry squad leader or something like that. Like there's all kinds of stuff like BAMSIS is one. It's an acronym for begin the reconnaissance, yada yada. I don't remember half of them. I'm also dyslexic, so like remembering that stuff was always hard for me. I had to really, crack down on it. But there are these things that they do. They teach you these little ditties or these things so that you can know them, so you can put them in memory, so you can be an expert at them, and so you can do it quickly and efficiently while you're learning all of these other skills on top of it. And it's like I had a girlfriend years ago. Her father, retired Navy captain, had his degree in nuclear engineering, his doctorate, and had commanded submarines and stuff. And I remember asking him about engineering. And I'm like, look, I get it. I'm not saying, like I know there's all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, but don't you think like for most people, like most of the equations, most things that you're doing, you could actually just teach OJT? And he was like, yeah, absolutely. And I was like, yeah, that's what I figured. you know, Now you're not going to take someone who has a 98 IQ and have them do the calculus needed for certain engineering problems, right? That's not going to happen. So there's got to be some sort of filter in between there. But the bottom line is that you might be able to get a guy to do one with a 115 IQ, which isn't terrible, but that's the midwit, right? And and they might be able to do the thing and understand the basics of it, but that's just getting it done. The expert's supposed to have some mastery of the knowledge of the thing as well and why it works on a deeper level. And what I was saying about earlier is I don't the people he's talking about too, I don't think they actually do. I don't think that they do at all. Um, I wasn't really as much on this train. I was skeptical for sure. I wasn't as much on this train though until I met Tank. But Tank's insistence on the expert class and all that stuff, it's better described as the midwit class. I think Malice, Michael Malice, that is, points this out. I think he's very right about it. Um, Aaron, what's his name? It's not Macintosh, is it? McIntyre. Arn, he talks about this to some degree too, and yeah, it's it's a it's the accreditation of the thing. And what an accreditation does is it basically tells the rest of the world, hey, look, I'm smart, or I'm this, I'm that. It's a way that we shorthand meritocracy. Okay. The problem with it is it's not real. It's completely fake. And it always has been. There was a point in time in academia where they would have made it more strenuous for you, but if you didn't really know your things, but they were going to help you along with it anyways. Now we're at a point where they do everything they can to help you along. I've been in classes, like basic classes, like basic mathematics and stuff like that, like college level, with people that supposedly already have master's degrees. And that's called a master's degree for a reason. You're supposed to be a master of the subject, of that field. A doctorate is somebody who actually contributes to the field, something new and innovative. And that's not really true either. They be handing out doctorates like candy. It doesn't mean that you actually innovated the field in any way, shape, or form. How many people's doctorate papers are ever even cited? So, again, this systematization, though, right, creates this accreditation that creates this mediocrity. It's this protective mechanism. It's like a union. It literally works like a union. It's all commie nonsense. Back in the day, okay, before all of this, even with universities, right? Before all of this, you could go and you could be a self starter, a person who goes and learns. You could be autodidactic and become a lawyer, right? I don't know about becoming a doctor. I'm not exactly sure how that happened, but really, the whole idea of a doctor, anyways, that's a Christian thing. Comes comes from the Christians. Christians made the universities basically, but uh, that's a whole nother side. Isn't it funny that out of itself, it destroyed itself, and its antithesis came basically in hatred of it. It's I don't know. It's almost like it's serendipitous or something, like it was meant to be, as if there were some sort of prophecies or something in that book that it would happen. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's some skeptic out there would say, but well, Bill, that's just coincidence. Of course, it could happen now. It doesn't mean it's real. They could follow that model, yada yada yada. Yeah, true, true. Um, but there's no reason for it to have worked that way. Now, is there? It's like it's really interesting as people start paying attention and realizing. I talked about this a bit last night. The magic and the irony, the way things happen in life, the things that are mystical, coincidental, as we often blow them off, or even when someone says, "I'm just lucky." Um, are you? Are you favored? Do you have grace? And of course, there are scientists, the hardcore atheists, be like, "Oh, we can disprove this, and that." And sure, sure. Anyways, let's hit play.
And if it stopped providing them with status, they wouldn't bother with it at all. But it does provide them with status, but the status has to come first. And so therefore, if there's something else that also gives you status, such as being woke, if you're a narcissist and being woke makes you admired and whatever, then the science has to bend to the wokeness. And so that's what they will present. They will present science up to a point. It's a bit like a scientists in, I don't know, the 16th century or whatever. We'll present our science up to a point where it questions church dogma.
I know you have many fine Muslim universities, Spook. If it wasn't for the Muslim worlds, Byzantium and the Muslim worlds what kept knowledge during the dark ages of Europe. And we have to keep that in mind.
And then we stop. And that's what they do. They will not suffer for their science, like Galileo suffered for science.
And this is a perfect point. So again, I talked about. I always say, Christianity is different. It's pulled out from the other religions, because the other religions, if you really get into them, and even the way Christianity appears in many Christian sects, it appears a lot like these other religions. But I think if you get to what the roots, the base of it is, if you get to the core of the Abrahamic faith, and what that was meant to evolve into, you'll see this direct clash. You just cannot reconcile the two. People try all the time, but I just don't see it, because it is something completely different. And so, to the point, and he's talking about Galileo suffering for the science. Who is the person who is in the right? Who is the one who is probably correct? Is it all of the world, which is corrupt and evil, who all believe this one thing? Or is it the one person who stands out against it? Because generally, unless there is some sort of actual physical harm being that's happening, right? So if I'm physically assaulting you in any sort of manner, I'm doing some sort of actual physical thing to you. If I'm taking away your property, right, or I'm preventing you from doing a thing, perhaps, then what harm am I doing by presenting ideas? And so why must I be arrested and locked up and persecuted for my ideas? And when you can answer that, I think you'll understand that this is why we need to let dumb ideas proliferate too, so we don't turn into the monsters that these people are. But also, I think it points to the truth. If you're a bigot because you don't believe in climate change, perhaps being a bigot is the true standpoint. you know? Um, Now there's some other ones we get into race and all that stuff. I find the race one just silly because I just don't get I get tribalism. I get it 100%. I but race is so stupidly broad. It doesn't get into the culture, the various ethnic groups. I don't even know. I can't even tell certain, like you all the time. You can't tell certain people like what race they are necessarily. Like an Australian Aboriginal looks like a black African in many respects, aside from their hair, and they have like blonde hair often. Um, you know, we could look at Pacific Islanders and see a similar kind of feature, but they depending on where they're from, they do look very different. Maori from New Zealand are not going to look like the same people necessarily in Hawaii. And they all have that like Southeast Asian kind of look, or that dark Asian look that you find in places like the Philippines, Thailand, and then as you move into like Vietnam and Cambodia and all that, people are a little bit lighter, depending, and then in China, way lighter, right? Not that there aren't dark Chinese people, but just saying, like, there's variety there, and there's variety in Middle Easterners. There's variety in the Rus, and the Rus people being a mix of some of those Middle Eastern people and Norse people and various things. So um, the point is that these like we have like these divergent evolutions, if you would, these divergent cultures, genetics that come up. They're going to express themselves differently. That was a family or whatever, but people have moved around and intermixed so much. There's only a few really isolated racial peoples anymore. And now there's people that talk about this. There's people on the interwebs that talk about it. One of the big channels might be like Robert Seffer, though I don't know if I'd buy a lot of his stuff. I think some of his stuff's good and some of his stuff's crap, and most of it's based in occult theosophy from H.P. Blavatsky that he's trying to pawn off to you as some sort of hidden knowledge. But you know, and the big secret is he'll talk about like the World War II Germany and their occultic beliefs, but the big secret that he's not telling you is that's all from H.P. Blavatsky's theosophy, and that's basically what the Nazis' religion was. It was theosophy with Nietzsche. It was the combination thereof. All right.
So that's the difference. They're ultimately interested in power and interested in status, and that is attractive to people that are high in narcissism, which is particularly vulnerable narcissism, has been shown to be associated with mental instability, and a high in Machiavellianism, which has also been shown if you want power, if you see the world as an unfriendly, dangerous place, that you're frightened, then of course you want to have power over people and to control them. And so what you're dealing with is these Machiavellian narcissistic people, and those people are very, very motivated and very, very able to take control from mentally stable people that see the good in people and see the world as a good place. And that's what they've managed to do, I think.
Now for something completely different. I'm writing this book on giftedness, the mistreatment of gifted children, and I thought you'd be
All right, guys, that was really all I wanted from this. That's a good interview, though. If you want to watch it, of course I encourage watch everything Professor Dutton puts out. It's good. It'll help you understand yourself more. It'll help you understand people. You know, he had a video today about intelligence and autism. There's another one here I have in the show notes about that. Why are we autistic sometimes less logical than normies? And of course, there is this thing he constantly pushes that we're getting less intelligent. And I've looked at the data on this over the years. The first time I was exposed to this, I think that we're getting dumber. Man, might have been all the way back 2016. Could have been 2015. It's hard to say. But maybe it was 2016 sounds more right. So at the time I was contributing to Lauren Chen, Roaming Millennial channel on Patreon. And so I got in Zoom hangouts and stuff. And I remember having this conversation. So one of the fellows in the conversation was like a Mensa guy, and then he was bringing up the race IQ thing, and he was a black guy. He's Jamaican in heritage, but was talking about how he would never see these people in the Mensa meetings. And then he lives out in Japan, and apparently he's buddies with Black Pigeon Speaks. So that back then, but I can't remember the guy's name. It was so long ago. It was before he met my wife. But yeah, they were talking about this and bringing this up, and I didn't really heard that before because I had been under the understanding that our IQ is going up. But as all of the synthetic society's propaganda basically was fading away at the time, it was being exposed to a lot of really based ideas. And it was the first time I'd been back in the politics in a while too, because you have to realize like I went through divorce and then like was dating a lot and my life kind of stabilized at that point. And then I stopped dating for a while before I got back into it, and met my wife and all that good stuff. But anyways, but I was skeptical, and I would see stuff on both sides. And in fact, even up until probably a year ago, I know while I was I've certainly made videos where I've said both, where I've said, seems like it's going down, but there's also data suggesting it's going up. I think it's more something like this. It's going down in the United States. It's going down in the West. And where it's going up at is our competitors. Where it's going up at is places like China, where they want vengeance upon the world for the embarrassment that they had in the 1950s as part of their 100-year plan. And though they're going to be in some serious demographic trouble here in the near future, they are certainly going to they're going to outpace us because they're not reliant on the rest of the world. They made themselves independent as much as possible. And then, unlike us, they did a sound thing and they invested and bought in other nations. And the fact that we let them do that's insane. But, we let them do that because we like the system, and the psychopaths at the top want to run the system the way it's run in China. They want to be able to tell you that you're a bad boy when you don't agree with them. That's where the social credit score comes in. Again, we just had a guy basically convicted and possibly put in jail for many, many, many years of his life over a stupid meme on Twitter that was inconsequential to any election outcomes, mind you. This is the repressive tolerance of the left, and it will continue. It is a dual legal system. If you're not in a state that is going to protect you, you're going to be screwed. And you need to get in a state that's going to protect you. I believe West Virginia is such a state. I believe West Virginia is such a state, and I have some proof of it because we kicked BlackRock out. We're not going under ESG. I haven't watched the video, but Jordan Peterson recently did a video with a state treasurer and ESG. I don't know if it was my state treasurer or not, because I didn't see who it was. But I've been doing other things. But yes, you can be in a state where they don't accept this stuff, and we've been saying this for a while. Localism is going to be the way to go, but it's beyond that. It's beyond localism, folks, because this isn't the 90s. It isn't just going to fade out and be defeated. The interwebs is here, right? These people organize and they're allowed to. You saw what just happened after this demented woman went out and murdered 3 children and 3 other adults, right? What happened? The victims got blamed. Not directly, but indirectly, right? Because the fact that the person did this, everyone who has the beliefs of the victims, anyone's a Christian, is now going to target this community. You see how that works? They get to do something evil, and then they turn it around, and then they get to say, don't do any evil to us. How dare you suggest that we even did anything evil in the first place? This is the first trick of sophistry, right? It's the idea of Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals, right? Accuse them of doing exactly what you're doing. That whole thing. It you don't have to memorize those rules. This is what psychopaths do. This is part of gaslighting, right? Gaslighting is essentially being, hey, you feel this way about this. I'm going to tell you what you want or need or feel. I personally don't respond well to that. I also have been in, a relationship that was that way. And so, and suffered dearly because of it, and didn't know what was going on because my upbringing didn't allow me the tools to understand what was going on. And so it was just like this, trying to dig in with this belief that I had to maintain this and this is how it had to be, and all at the same time, being depressed and miserable and whatever else, and and that's no way to live. I I will never be a slave like that again. I'll tell you that. Um, and I don't want you to go through that. I don't want anyone to go through that. I know life is not necessarily so black and white because we are complicated beings and we do things. We make mistakes, we get upset, we misinterpret information, we do all kinds of things. Again, I'm going to talk about till my face is blue, till things come out. Things I can't necessarily even talk about, but like the James O'Keefe thing, like Project Veritas, homeboy could have just taken a vacation for 2-3 months and come back and everything would have been fine. And instead his baby, he torpedoed because he could not unilaterally run that company the way that he wanted to. He couldn't fire the CFO because the CFO was trying to rein him in on his spending. And y'all might think, oh, but that story, it was kind of, oh, you know, it didn't seem right, this and that. Dude, James trained under Breitbart. James has learned to be a master media manipulator. And I'll tell you, James, I don't think he's like malevolent, but you know, he's got that sort of psychopathic one one trick pony mindset, just dog with a ball. I'm just going to go for it. This is my thing. Da, da, da. I'm right. I can do anything. Look what I've done. And the reality is that there's the whole behind the scenes thing. When I called in the Matt and Blonde, you know, I think they're horrible movie reviewers, by the way, but I say this because their takes on the Prestige are just like, I was just like, you're insane. Like, the movie's like way more depth than what you picked up there. It's about obsession and revenge, and that's why you completely missed the point. You didn't understand why things happen the way it happened. But anyways, you know, the primary premise in that movie is that there is a great magician who sucks at being a showman, okay, and that there is a great showman who sucks at being a magician. And the rivalry is over an unfortunate event, but you know, it goes the showman basically goes like insanely off the rails. And that's the obsession, right? And the other, you know, the magician has he's got an obsession too. I actually saw in the comments somebody said that the reason why the Prestige didn't get much notice at the time is because at the same time The Illusionist came out with Edward Norton and what's her name from Jessica Biel, and The Illusionist is a decent movie, but it's not a movie that has depth to it. It's a movie that's a good popcorn movie. It's a movie that has a happy ending. It's a movie that's like, oh, that's kind of cool. That was a cool thing. You know, I like that movie. It's not The Prestige. In any case, but that was the Project Veritas thing. You have a guy on the front, right, who's the showman, and you have 60 people behind the scenes who are actually doing the magic. And from that perspective, maybe you can see where that went wrong. And it's not that, again, my wife's never said anything bad about James as far as like treatment. He's always been kind to her. 2 times I met the dude, he was perfectly nice, although I've seen him be a little rude to donors and other things. I know people that complain about James, and it's not, again, about James being impolite or anything. It's James not knowing how to run the business well. But the best place for him was, you know, in the for-profit world, not the nonprofit world, actually. And that's been well known for a long time. But he's been doing this, trying to do this nonprofit route. And in any case, but we get caught up in this stuff. We get caught up. People get caught up. They want to pick a human being as an idol, and they want to make him a god and make them the sole focus of all things that are, you know, the mission. And my friends, you can't do that. If you're going to do that with anybody, you got to do that with you. You alone, no one else, just you. Because everyone else is going to disappoint you, I promise. I will disappoint you. I promise. I promise. Because I am but a man. And you know, I disappoint myself even. So how about that? But prestige unto itself, right? Status unto itself is a signifier of authority to most people. Now, I want to say not to me, but it is to me to some degree. But it's not. I would assume in humility that somebody who's supposed to be an expert knows more than I do. Okay? Like, I generally always come from that position until they open their mouth. And if I know anything about what they're talking about, or anything they're saying is illogical, then I have issue. Anyways, let me look at some chat. Let's see. If only the requisition of the Mongolian invasion never happened. Okay. Must have been something I said earlier. What's going on with Rumble here? Do I have chats? Well, there was a chat earlier, but it's gone now. All right, guys. So there were a few other things that that I wanted to get to. All right, let's do this last one here. Last one here. And this will be it for the week, guys. I'm not going to stream tomorrow. I need a day off. I have been running around. I got to get like I'm a late sleeper, late, night owl, late sleeper. I've been getting to bed pretty decently though, honestly, like 2, 3 a.m. That's pretty good for me. And getting up like 9:30. But yeah, I have to get lunch with my wife and our realtor tomorrow. We're making an offer on a house. And then I am going to look into this other job. Going to try and get that rolling. And then I have a car that has a transmission issue. I'm not sure exactly what, but I know it has a transmission issue. It was supposed to be for my daughter. I've had it forever. I don't know. I bought brand new tires for it just right before it stopped driving it, before it started acting funky. So, that was like $600, $700, $800, whatever that was. It's got like a brand new alternator on it. It's got a brand new battery because, alternator went bad, drained the battery, killed the battery. Brand new shocks, that are 2 years old. So not brand new, but 2 years old, man. Something like that. What else have on? Has a bunch of stuff. Like, anyways, there is there's a junkyard that sells cars or reclaims and whatever it does with them, like right around the corner from me, and they weren't taking any vehicles. I keep putting it off. I keep forgetting about it. It's been a while now. Anyways, I'm thinking about getting pictures, putting on Craigslist, Facebook, whatever, trying to get best offer for it. But I need it off my dang hands. So, if anybody's interested, you can email me or find me on Twitter, do that thing, whatever. But yeah, I got to take care of that. And then I got to change the oil in my car tomorrow as well. So I got a pretty busy day. I don't think I'm going to, and trying to get a stream in. It's been really warm. So I'm sure I'm going to be pretty tired, given the heat. But let's watch one more video or part of it before I get out of here. And then I will be back, guys, next Tuesday. I ought to be. I kind of don't want to say that because I kept saying like, oh, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this, and it just wasn't happening. I was getting very annoyed with all of that, but it is what it is. Such is life. And believe it or not, I like to be a man of my word. Bill, what do you think of a military rank based centralized police system? I think well, I want to make sure I understand what you're asking there, Spook. You mean a military based centralized police system? I'm not sure what you mean by military rank. But because a rank in the military is the position, the order, the hierarchy that you're in. So I got out of the Marine Corps as a corporal, should have been a sergeant. There's a story to that, but anyways, I wasn't busted. That's the one thing. I didn't lose rank. I just didn't get the promotion. I missed by 10 points, and I should have had 30 points. But yeah, only that because of reasons. Anyways, I should have been 20 points over, is what I'm saying. But someone else didn't do their job, and that cost me a promotion. And then stop loss happened literally the next month. The score shot up by, I don't know, 100 points or whatever, and then I got out. But big reason why I got out, actually, if I picked up sergeant like I should have, especially on time, because I think I don't remember if I was eligible for corporal the first. I think the score, I missed the score the first month I was eligible for corporal. I might be wrong, but I think the score was high, and then it dropped, and I made it my second month I was eligible. I can't remember. But in any case, yeah. So I'm not in favor of any sort of centralized police force, and I'm actually not in favor of a standing army of any sort. I'm very old school American on this. No standing armies, local. One of the things about all the FUDs out there, everyone, no one talks about this. Some people mention it now and again. Some people we know, but you guys don't know tactics. You have a gun. You're not doing anything. Trust me. You don't train with it. You don't train tactics with it. You don't train force on force. You don't do anything to make you proficient. And those of you who do, you all do it individually. You all do it individually, and you don't have a team. So, you need to change that. It's like, I ask people if they want to train martial arts stuff with me, and I got a lot of knowledge to give, a lot of knowledge in that area to give. I can teach you to do fun, crazy stuff, simple stuff. You don't need to be doing like I don't know, like triple flying kicks or anything crazy, right? But I mean like fun stuff. Like I can teach you how to take a t-shirt like I'm wearing now and how to choke somebody out with it, a blood choke, a very humane choke that they'll just pass out and they'll be okay. Um, I am a I'm a big fan of blade weapons. I really like blade weapons. I really am a big fan of flexible weapons. There is a whole style of Japanese well, it's not jujitsu, but it's Japanese knot tying that is used for S&M today, but it comes straight out of samurai um samurai martial arts. I'll look it up because I never remember the name of it. As soon as I look it up, it's gonna show me a bunch of pictures of like, okay, that's not bad. Um, okay, that's an art. This is different. Uh, Kinbaku. Okay, Kinbaku. That's one. Is a modern form of rope bondage. Okay, but Shibira or whatever. Anyways, I don't know. It's got different names. There's one I think called with the jitsu, but I don't. My Japanese martial arts lingo is not as good as it once was. But in any case, so they do things like so what they would do is they take a long piece of rope and you have it like up your sleeve, cloth, whatever, or you'd have it somewhere, and you have a basic loop on the end of it. And it's a basic like noose style loop where if you pull it, it automatically snags, pulls tight. So what's the idea of that? Well, I grab your wrist, throw the loop over it, I pull it, now I have you, and then you try to escape or whatever. I have the rope, wrap the rope around your head, I get your other arm. Next thing I know, I'm hog tying you. Um, the the Japanese made a whole martial arts out of this, and I know some of it. Not a ton of it, but I know enough of it, and I know how to use flexible weapons and all that kind of stuff. And it's fun stuff that is handy. I can make a pair of handcuffs real quick. I can use my belt as a handcuff and other things that are nasty. But you know, I can't get people to come train. People are lazy. They don't want to. They don't want to prove their lives. For me, I'm obsessed with. I don't do as much as I used to, but I would. That's all I would do. like, uh, I mean, if I could, if I'd made better choices as a young man, that's probably all I would have been doing. Be training with guys all the time. So I love that stuff. Let me see here. Like police ranks and military ranks are basically the same, but police and military are still separate, especially American NCO. Okay, okay. I get what you're saying. No, yeah. I mean, almost all law enforcement has military ranks in it. Law enforcement in America is considered paramilitary. So para meaning basically pseudo or kind of military or like military. Of course, the Boy Scouts are technically a paramilitary group as well. But you know, anyways, let's play this video. Let's play this video because it's almost 1 o'clock. This just came out the other day from the Academy of Ideas, and I love the Academy of Ideas. And who is the guy who voiced this? Because I've done forgotten already. Oh, it says in the beginning here, but it's another YouTuber, and I can't think of his name off the top of my head.
Content, consider becoming a supporting member and get instant access to over 70 membership videos. Learn more at academyofideas.com/members. This video is guest narrated by Clifton
That's
Duncan.
right.
Follow the link in the pinned comment to his podcast, which delves into major issues of our modern era at the tumultuous intersection of art, culture, and society.
The world would be most happily governed if it consisted not of a few aggregations with their accompaniments of despotism and tyrannic rule, but of a
I just want to say I'm about done with Western society thinking Augustine was the greatest philosopher of all time. That's all I'm saying.
society of small states. Should the states and provinces of nations separate and become politically autonomous? Should counties, cities, and communities do the same?
That, I guarantee you, is a West Virginian town. Guarantee you. If that ain't, that's like in the mountains. That's in Georgia in the Appalachians or something.
What is the optimal size of a political unit? In this video, we're going to explore why the nation-states that populate the world are too big and why decentralization, not voting different politicians into power, is the cure to many of the social and political problems that ail us. In his book, The Breakdown of Nations, the 20th century economist and political scientist Leopold Kohr wrote, "The solution of the problems confronting the world as a whole does not seem to lie in the creation of still bigger social units and still vaster governments, whose formation is now attempted with such unimaginative fanaticism by our statesmen. It seems to lie in the elimination of those overgrown organisms that go by the name of great powers, and in the restoration of a healthy system of small and easily manageable states, such as characterized earlier ages." The modern nation-state, encompassing vast land areas and millions upon millions of people, was born in Europe in the mid-17th century, and this form
So I kind of already addressed this earlier, but this is why I play these videos, right? Because I can ramble and say all this stuff off the top of my head and be mostly correct. But I feel like there's always, it's always good to have various other perspectives. And just like I said not too long ago, the original state of Europe, when we watched in the other video, was mostly small nation states. I believe this for that city states are the way to go, folks. You want a decentralized control of things. Our problem isn't necessarily that the government's too big and all that other stuff. It is. Don't get me wrong. But it's the restrictions and the type of restrictions we've put on the government. One of the first things that we did out of the progressive era is we got rid of the right of the states to elect its own senators. I mentioned being on a Zoom call or hangout or whatever with Lauren Chen. Used to be on them all the time, just like you know, used to talk with Matt and Blonde all the time because I supported those guys for a long time, and um, that was something that was an argument. Is these guys were like telling me, "Oh no, well you can't get rid of the state senate, blah blah blah." Like, no, you got to let the people have that. And I'm like, no. When you did doing that, eroded all power of the state. You don't. That was a buffer. There was the people, then there was the states, then there was the Fed. Guess what there is today? There's just the state and the Fed. And the state's very weak because it doesn't have its senators, and the people are 30% retarded. So, and again, not an elitist, but there's a freaking hierarchy to this stuff, right? You know, I'm 5'6". I'm most likely not going to play in the NBA. But someone who is 6'5" is more likely to, correct? We just understand that. So if we had people who were moral in our government, that would be nice. But at least if we had, people who were intelligent, and it seems to be that they're not that intelligent, they're wise for themselves, but not for others. And they don't really care. Or maybe they do care. Because here's another thing that I thought about, and this goes back to the demographics, and this is something I was thinking about early in the week. We have a geriatric oligarchy, and it is fighting against this this new generation of millennials and Zoomers for power. Because my generation, the Gen Xers, I don't know where we went, but we're not vocal in government. Basically, what the Gen Xers have done is they took over for the boomers, and just prolong the reign of the boomers. The boomers are in the government more than Gen Xers, and I'm sure there's Gen Xers in the government. Don't get me wrong. My point is that the cultural influence is still from the boomers. And what do the boomers concentrate on? They concentrate on credentialism. And a guy come to work, I immediately complained to my wife about him as soon as I got off, because and I don't complain about people generally, like unless they're like really bad. But I had a guy come to work. I was supposed to train up and all this stuff, and he earned the nickname Boomer Guy from me because all he wanted to talk about was all the people that he knew, all of their credentials, what school they went to, what they did in their life. And I'm like, I don't care. I don't care. I don't care who your friends are, what, they did, what this and that, because it's not really relevant to me. And it's not relevant to this job. And I'm trying to teach you this job, you know. Um, that, and he was trying to point out like, you know, like we were driving, and like this guy lives here and that guy lives there. He's like pointing his finger in my eye, and I'm like, that's like like especially while I was driving. It's like that like primal state of I'm going to break your finger if you don't get it out of my face, like kind of thing, you know. Um, and of course, that guy ended up having a lot of problems and issues. He was complaining about um all kinds of, he was complaining about customers and their properties and how they expect him to drive his his Mazda Miata up to their property when they, you know, we're like country back road areas. Like a lot of people have gravel and dirt roads. Like, whose fault is that, boomer guy? Is it their fault or is it your fault for driving the Miata? You know, anyways, there's something with that generation. I don't know what it is. It's not all of them, but it for sure that credentialism, that accreditation, highly important to them. One of the most important things that they um, seek after, and it's essentially to you know, it's clout chasing, and it's no wonder why that our systems in the West, I'm you know speaking primarily to America, but in the West are so screwed up because we're basically going, oh, you know what? Here's a union that's going to protect you and let you be incompetent, but also at the same time, because that's what they're doing with credentialism. It's like a union. It's like a guild. It's the same thing. It's a protective means, right? It's a form. Another way we could describe it, it's like rent seeking, and it's a form of protecting yourself and your class of people. And so, if you're an academic, right, you're a special class. We're the intelligentsia. We get to dictate to society what's true and real and right. And what you'll find is, of course, true scientists are humble. They're not they're not idiots and sociopathic like that. They're humble. They throw out there, well, I don't know this, I don't know that. I'm not really sure. I could speculate, but you know, that kind of thing. I love this picture too with all these people top the Capitol. Look up here in the rotunda. Anyways, um, but yeah, this is like something that it didn't exist before, and it certainly didn't exist in America. It only exists with people who want to be special and elite. And it's like, I don't care about being special. I just care about living life. I want to talk about these things, and you know, if other people find me special, then okay, I guess that's kind of cool. But like this is something I battled with a lot of my life, and I'm kind of pretty adamant that I prefer to never be in academia because I see it as some sort of imprisonment of my mind. You know, um, but what do? They create their own guilds, right? They create their own um, mystery schools to allow the adepts to come in to then be indoctrinated. By the way, these words are the words that you know you would be indoctrinated. The mysteries would be revealed to you. Well, what do you think we're doing in academia? What do you think we're doing when all of the papers, the academic papers, are behind paywalls and these journals and whatever else? And people are like, well, but you have to have money to do these things and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I get it. I get it. Also, what about the student loan crisis and all the subsidies you've got from the governments? Yeah. See, if you use that money appropriately, if it wasn't about some sort of religious credentialism and secretism of the mysteries of the universe, then you would use that money appropriately. But it's not about any of that, right? It's not about sharing the truth. It's about indoctrinating people. That's why universities used to be cheap. It's because it was about sharing the truth. Now it's about obfuscating the truth, providing a simulacrum, and then saying, hey, guess what? You know what's going to be best for you? How about you totally focus inward on yourself and that you're a victim and beat everyone over the head with that, like some sort of narcissist who gets to control everything, ultimate power through your victimhood. It's like, I don't know. I'm gonna play a couple more minutes of this. I'm starting to get tired, so it's 1 o'clock. Let's do like 10 minutes of this. You got maybe not even that long.
Form of political organization is a historical aberration. The anthropologist Robert Carnero estimates that for 99.8% of human history, small and decentralized political units have been the norm. Even in the last 6,000 years, large centralized systems, be they kingdoms or empires, have been an anomaly. From the ancient Greek city-states to the 1,000-year European Middle Ages, to the colonies of Pennsylvania and New England in early America, to Switzerland from the 12th to 18th century, the historical examples of politically decentralized regions are plentiful. It is striking to reread history with eyes opened to the persistence of this decentralized tradition.
The decentralized position as well provides for a better control of supply chain. It provides for better economics for the locals. It provides for better trade with other communities. It provides for more opportunity for prosperity, as whenever you decentralize anything, you make it more robust. Because if one part of the system fails, another part can pick up its slack, or the numerous parts can. And so, and I've spoke of this of sorts here and there to people as I've slowly been integrating back into the, streaming and being a little bit more public again. Um, I actually have a plan that I think totally will work if I can get the capital going, and I think I can. That is sort of in this now. The Academy of Ideas just released this 7 days ago. I came up with this plan 6 months ago, so you know, excuse the disparity there, but it is one of those things in the background my wife and I are working on, and I do believe we got to make this move and a few other things, but I do believe that once we have done that and we're up and running, probably by the end of summer, it'll be a year and a half, 2 years max. I think within 8 years, we're going to be in a very different financial position, and we're going to be putting people into communities. So I'm pretty adamant about that. And I don't know all the rigmarole I have to go through, but we'll figure it out.
Because at once you begin to see the existence of the anti-authoritarian, independent, self-regulating local community is every bit as basic to the human record as the existence of the centralized imperial hierarchical state, and far more ancient, more durable, and more widespread.
So this is, of course, also the argument of all the monarchists that back in the monarchy times you didn't have to deal with all this other stuff. And that's not really true. But the local communities were decentralized. You still had to, with this though, had to deal with your local community. If your local community thought you were a witch, it wasn't the church necessarily that went after you. It was the local community or government. If you were a heretic of any sort, you could be murdered by the mob. This was one of the reasons why in the Enlightenment and in the American intellectual tradition, we wanted to get away from mob rule. Unfortunately, the Dark Enlightenment, the last half of it, preferred the mob rule, all except for perhaps Nietzsche. So, no, I shouldn't say all of them. I mean, there are other people there. There are other people that I like that are lesser acknowledged because leftist philosophy is what rules everything. But like de Tocqueville for sure, Bastiat. So the French were actually the real French libertarians were actually really good, but the the collectivist man. And two, understand that balance between the collective and the individual, because that's a balance we all have to mitigate, negotiate and mitigate. Like, um, it's easy to do in America. Like, you can ignore your neighbors and whatever else, but you live with anybody, you got roommates, you're married, you have kids, you're negotiating that relationship constantly. It's just how it is. So, anyways, I don't think there was something else I wanted to say on that, but whatever.
Explains Kirkpatrick Sale in Human Scale Revisited. Why have decentralized political units been so common throughout history? Could it be that this form of political organization is congruent with human nature and conducive to individual and societal flourishing?
Yes, it's called Dunbar's number, and that was the other thing I wanted to talk about. He might mention that in this. But yeah, that's why. You can't, like, one of the beautiful things about the internet is I can talk to you and connect with you, and you can be across the world and whatever, and I can actually build a relationship with you as a human being, and so there's going to be empathy and caring and all that kind of stuff. But we're not in the same place, and that's a problem. It's not a problem that we're not in the same place. It's a problem that we're not making those human empathetic connections and being like-minded and building ourselves up together. And instead of trying to build these kind of communities, then we're like, well, these are our ethics, morals, and standards for these communities, and we expect you to uphold them. Mind you, I hate HOAs, but I'm just saying. Instead of doing that, we just have this haphazard thing where it's like, oh, well, you get to live your own life, and then you have to live next door to me, and you live your own life, and da da da. And it does create issues. It creates problems. Um, More importantly, though, is the telos, the purpose, the drive, the meaning, the thing that makes you get out of bed in the morning. And your children might be that. Your job might be that. Life itself might be that for you. But I almost promise you that if you have a community that you actually knew and people had expectations of you and they cared for you, and you couldn't just disappear and leave in the ether to go start something new, to move around a lot, as sociopathic people do, um, I guarantee you, you would find much more purpose, because you would feel as if you were part of this greater thing. You would feel as if your community was there in support of you, and you weren't just some isolated being as an individual amongst all these other beings that you don't even know. That's a reality. I take my daughter to a little park, it's in our neighborhood. I don't know the name of any of the parents. I know the names of the kids. Um, I don't know the names of any of the parents, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. When we go and our kids are sitting there playing together and whatever else, and we live in this community, and I can't get into an actual deep conversation with random people because of the way and structure of the world today, because I might find that I'm dealing with a crazy person with crazy religious beliefs about how the cult of death is the progressive way of the future. Now, I'm calling it flat out for what it is, the cult of death. It is the Antichrist religion. But they don't know that, nor do they believe in anything that I believe in or have any understanding of it. And 90% of the time I have a conversation with somebody, Spook, you probably feel this way when it comes to people talking to you about Islam, which is why I don't address. I have my beliefs about Islam, but I don't make a big deal about it on here because I don't believe I know enough to um, to talk about it. And I know certain things that I think are good within Islam. I know certain things I think that are bad within Islam. But the bottom line is I wouldn't go on and try and espouse myself as some expert. I do, I think you have some understanding where I stand on that. But my point is I often get, people all the time trying to tell me and lecture me what Christianity is about. I know you weren't here earlier in the stream, Spook, but I was quoting a quote from Nietzsche. It says, "The everyday Christian, if the Christian dogmas of a revengeful God, universal sinful election by divine grace, and the danger of eternal damnation were true, it would be a sign of a weak-mindedness and a lack of character not to become a priest, an apostle, or a hermit, and in fear of trembling to work solely on one's own salvation. It would be senseless to lose sight of one's eternal advantage for the sake of temporal comfort. If we may assume that these things are at any level believed true, then the everyday Christian cuts a miserable figure. He is a man who really cannot count to three, and who, precisely on account of his spiritual imbecility, does not deserve to be punished so harshly as Christianity promises to punish him." And that whole sentence, or sentences, that whole paragraph, I should say, um, is full of just inaccuracy after inaccuracy. The dogma of a revengeful God, that's not really a Christian dogma. The Christian dogma is of a loving God. Um, vengeance being the Lord's is justice. It's not vengeance. It's setting things right. It's making balance. Universal sinfulness, that's not actually a Christian doctrine. That is an Augustinian doctrine that came up in the 5th century. Didn't exist before then. It is Manichaean in origin, which is a Gnostic Hermetic religion. Election by divine grace, and that is the same thing. That's actually a Calvinistic perspective, which makes sense because Nietzsche was a German, and Calvinism started in Germany. And also Lutheranism, which was, Martin Luther was an Augustinian monk. So I can trace the intellectual roots to it pretty easily. The eternal damnation. Well, eternal damnation means different things to different people in the faith. He says, becoming a priest, apostle, or a hermit. I believe being a hermit is antithetical to Christianity. I know that, monks are promoted in the Catholic Church as well as the Eastern Orthodox Church, and it is antithetical to the beliefs set out in the Bible. What was it? Monasticism didn't even start in Christianity until like the 3rd century, if I'm not mistaken. So it's not like it's an early tradition. The guy who started it, was sort of a mystic as well. Um, I can't remember the details off of that, but I've gone down this rabbit hole before of how it started. In any case, so there's that. And then to work solely on one's own salvation, fear and trembling to work solely on one's own salvation. Well, Christianity, you don't work on your salvation. Now, I can only speak, or I will only speak to an original intent of Christianity from the early church fathers, which all seem to be in harmony with the scriptures, and also what is clearly gleaned from Jewish tradition prior to that. And you don't work towards salvation. Salvation is given to you, but what you do is you work towards not salvation. You work towards maintaining it. You run the race. You stay in the faith. If you mess up, you admit to it. You go through the process of dying to yourself and rebirth daily. You need to constantly change your character. See, here this is the thing. People don't follow their faith like that, right? Christians don't follow their faith like that. They don't. They don't. Try and constantly reinvent themselves. Now, some do. I do. But because people aren't pious, because they're not dedicated, doesn't warrant this critique either. In any case, it would be senseless to lose sight of one's eternal advantage for the sake of temporal comfort. Sure. Sure. But also, there's the condition of being human, which Nietzsche should have understood pretty well. It's probably why he wrote half these things, because he was a very sick man, and I mean that like he was ill. He had physical problems. If we may assume that these things are at any rate believed true, then the everyday Christian cuts a miserable figure, yada yada yada, and be so harshly punished by the by the promises he is punished. Yeah, whatever. Like the scriptures are actually rather vague about punishment, and also we can assume, I would say, or infer based on the numerous scriptures about the types of punishment that they're not all equal. And just like there are many rewards or many mansions in our Father's house, depending on how you live your life in this world, is going to depend on the reward. So none of that's really in there. It's just this very straw manny, I believe this is what Christianity is. And of course, if the exposure to Christianity is Christianity primarily in the 1800s from Calvinism, Lutheranism, and Catholicism, okay, you're probably going to come to those conclusions.
To explore this idea, let's envisage some of the problems that a decentralized world might solve. One of the problems afflicting nations today is the growing polarization between those on the political left and right, between capitalist and socialist, and between those who favor freedom and those who prefer authoritarian rule. No matter the political party in power, and no matter the policies, rules, and
That's a good
laws
point,
that are
Matt.
imposed, there is a significant minority, or in some cases, majority, forced to submit to politics to which they do not consent. This situation is feeding the flames of culture wars, pitting neighbors against one another, and increasing the possibility of a civil
Well, hello,
war.
Rumble. It says I have
But what
52
if,
eyes. That's not.
instead of
I
a
can't be
couple
current.
hundred nations, the world consisted of thousands or even tens of thousands of autonomous political units, each free to experiment with their own form of governance? A coastal region could experiment with free market anarchy, a city-state could implement socialism, a rural community could choose a rule by a king, a mountain valley region could be a democracy, while a small island state could experiment with a meritocracy. With a greater number and variety of governance structures, there would be more political freedom of choice and greater opportunities for individuals to live with those who share their societal vision.
It is quite obvious that the multitude of different individual and regional wills and preferences can be much better served in a small state world than in a large power system, or, worse still, in one super colossal single world state. If freedom of choice is considered an advantage economically, why not also politically?
What is more, in a decentralized world, no matter the form of government that existed in each small political unit, it is likely that the majority would be far more efficient and responsive than the massive governments of our world. For when it comes to the functioning of government, size is a critical factor.
This is interesting here. This picture they have. Interesting to me because I've been researching city planning and whatnot, but I actually as far as the big great plan that I have was inspired by a place out in Washington State, and that we went to for a wedding, and you know, people talk about this 15-minute city stuff and how bad that is, and I don't think it's a bad thing, actually. I think it's a bad thing if you don't have vehicles and you can't get away from the 15-minute city. But I actually think that planning like a smaller sort of town that's a little bit more homogenous in a lot of ways is good. It's called new urbanism is the style, and you see this a lot. This pops up down in Maryland off 270. So 270 is the tangent you take on the interstate to go to Washington, D.C. And so you go from Frederick, Maryland, which is on 70, and you cut down that tangent southward on 270. And as you go down there, it's country for a bit. And there's a area, was it is it Hyattsville? I think it is. I haven't been down that way in a while. Um, and you get a little bit off there, and there's like this little like new urban shopping center and um you know, town, it's not really town, but town homes and single family homes and stuff like that. And it's kind of planned in this way so that people can get out and walk and whatever. And people like this. It's nice. It looks pretty. It's convenient. It's and it brings back in the community, but it doesn't make for a large town, which can create its own problems and how towns sprawl. But you also see this a lot in Northern Virginia. You see this around Columbia, Maryland. You know, a lot of newer constructions are going towards this. Down in Winchester, Virginia, about, I don't know, 10 years ago, maybe, they completely sort of like this has these blocks up here. They completely shut down their downtown and what they call Old Town. Winchester's growing tremendously right now. Great prosperity going on there. Out in the middle of the countryside, nowhere, in the middle of nowhere, city of 20,000 people has uh, really big private college, Shenandoah College, but you know, has an insane like I would not have believed this, and this is all very recent because it probably was not like this 10 years ago, but insane Hispanic population. It's like I couldn't believe it. Like, because Nova is different. Like Northern Virginia outside of DC, okay, but all that's built up. Winchester's out in the middle of nowhere, you know. In any case, though, they you know, they have this whole like downtown, like cars can't drive through, and the businesses they have a city walk now. This has become a very popular, common thing, and why can't we build this? Why can't we build these little small hamlets, as I've called them? Um, you know, why can't we integrate that with new ruralism, which is something that I don't think anyone's doing here in the U.S. New ruralism. Uh, India, China, sure, but again, you start looking into these things and planning and you know, I like the sustainable world model. I don't want to force it on anybody. I don't think that the UN should be dictating zoning codes to the entire earth, which they do. I don't want it to be the religion that unites all of humanity and scream down at us because that's what it is. Um, and this is also, like I said, I'm making this comparison. It's the Antichrist religion, because if you read your scriptures, something I've been eschatology, the concerning the end of the world. This is something I've been obsessed with pretty much my entire life. So, you know, and it's so many things suddenly make sense and line up to me, and so I'm very excited about that. But in any case, this is sort of the plan forward, the way forward, and it's actually what will happen. And the Byzantium must happen, folks. But I'm gonna exit out of this, and I got a show already planned for you guys next week. So I'll have the next several days to get it organized. Probably working on tomorrow night some, but I'm definitely not going to stream tomorrow night because I just got too much stuff to do. You know, like I said, I got to get an offer for this house. Got to uh, get this job secured. I'm trying to get this my car on Craigslist to see if anyone will buy this freaking thing for almost nothing. And then I got to change my oil. So, maybe the oil change I can just take somewhere. I guess I could do that, but it's going to be, I already have the stuff to change it. And I don't want to pay $100 for an oil change. Whatever. Hey guys, thanks for watching. Let me run through the chat real quick here, just not to get too far back, but Smart City's a digital prison. Yeah, no, I wouldn't disagree. Okay. I mean, I'm not in the smart cars. I don't want all this advanced technology. What I'm talking about is wouldn't it be nice? So, I also want to use permaculture principles. So you can look into permaculture if you want, but if you don't know what that is, it's like basically using the land itself, the way it naturally works to help garden or grow crops and to be out of floodplains and that kind of stuff. Because that's the other stuff that you have to plan for when you're doing, development is floodplains and whatever else. How do you get your water supply? Is the water supply going to get contaminated by this? Da, 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 da. There are numerous things. I'm not a city planner. I don't plan on on becoming one. I have an idea that I think is actionable through the division of labor, and I think I'm going to get it done. And it's scalable. It's very scalable. So I could start it very small and a very condensed thing and then either expand it out or have other little hamlets, like I said. There's a means in which I want to do this by. I'm again, all this I have to kind of slow roll because I don't want to get too big for my britches. I want to be able to actually do it, start implementing things, and then be able to come back and say, "Hey guys, this is what I'm doing." Okay, because then it's provable, right? So you plan, you take the action, and then if you get it to work, then you can go back and you can say, "Well, how do I teach this to other people?" But until it's actionable and it works, I don't feel comfortable, on the speculation. Although the means and methods in which I'm using are proven, or which I plan on using, are proven by other people. So, there's that. Point is, we can do that. We can do that, especially if we can get large swaths of land. Same thing. I've been saying this for 2 years. I want to get 1,000 acres, and I mean that, or more. This is how you do that. The place that I, uh, was inspired by and all is only I think 60 acres total. And it's beautiful, right on it's beachfront property and stuff like that. But the community, the town, the way it is very isolated, but it's also very nice. It's quaint. It's supposed to be set up like an old New England town, even though it's on the West Coast. I think these things are possible. And then there's, of course, the other parts of this. Like I was saying with the permaculture, I'd like to have like, fruit plants all around, certain garden plots, just a way to start integrating, to do city planning that integrates the realities of life or what you need to survive and sustain yourself with, with modern technology, not smart city technology, mind you, modern engineering principles, I should say. How about that? How about that? Anyways, all right, guys, I'm gonna get out of here. Thanks for being here. Appreciate y'all. I'll be back next Tuesday, 10 p.m. Eastern. Guys, if you're on Rumble right now for any reason, please give me a like. I've seen some eyes have dropped in here, but please give me a like. I haven't seen anything in the chat. I don't know if the chat's being weird. I did a pop out. Don't know what's going on. But otherwise, give me a like on YouTube. Share this out. Tell your friends. Oh, even the YouTube's not updating, man. Here we go. Okay. There we go. Cool, cool, cool. All right, guys. It's my mic dips. Thanks for watching. Hey, this has been All Minus One. My name is Bill, and I wish you all well.